They rejected her on the night she should have become someone. Kaela Thorn had waited her whole life for the bonding ceremony. The moment when pack bonds were forged, when futures were decided. But when the moon rose over Greystone territory, her name was never called. No bond, no place, no future. Just silence, and the quiet erasure of a girl deemed too weak to matter. Most would have begged. Kaela walked, straight into the wilderness where the forgotten go to die, or become something else entirely. Stay with us to see how a rejected outcast becomes the one name no alpha can ignore. Like and comment with your city below. The bonfire roared against the winter sky, throwing wild shadows across the clearing where Greystone Pack had gathered. Kaela stood at the edge of the crowd, her fingers knotted together, her breath misting in the cold air. Around her, wolves talked in low, eager voices. Excitement hummed through the clearing like electricity before a storm. Tonight was the bonding ceremony, the most important night in any young wolf's life. Kaela had dreamed of this night since she was a child. She'd imagined it 1,000 times, standing before the pack elders, feeling the ancient magic settle over her like a cloak, binding her to her packmates, giving her a place, a purpose, a future. She wasn't strong like some of the others. She wasn't fast or fierce, but she was loyal, she was careful. She paid attention. That had to count for something. It had to. Nervous? Kaela turned. Mira stood beside her, arms crossed, her dark hair pulled back in a tight braid. Mira had always been kind to her, in a distant sort of way. Not quite a friend, but not cruel either. A little, Kaela admitted. Mira's expression softened, but there was something else there too. Pity, maybe. You'll be fine, just keep your head down. Don't draw attention. It was the same advice Kaela had heard her whole life. Don't draw attention. Don't make waves. Don't stand out. She'd gotten good at it. Too good, maybe. So good that sometimes she felt invisible even when people were looking right at her. The drums began. A hush fell over the clearing. Elder Corwin stepped forward, his white hair gleaming in the firelight, his eyes sharp and ancient. Behind him stood the other elders, 5 in total, each one a pillar of Greystone's history. They carried the old magic in their blood, the kind that couldn't be taught or faked. Corwin raised his hand, and the drums stopped. Tonight, he said, his voice carrying across the clearing, we bind the next generation to our pack. Tonight, we forge the bonds that will carry Greystone into the future, the bonds that make us stronger than any single wolf could ever be. Cheers erupted. Kaela's heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. One by one, names were called. Jax Hale, a broad-shouldered young man, stepped forward, grinning like he'd already won something. The elders surrounded him, murmuring the old words in a language Kaela had never fully understood, and she watched as the magic took hold, a faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising off stone in summer. Jax's eyes flared gold for a moment, and when he stepped back, he was different, bonded, part of something larger than himself. The crowd erupted in applause. Jax's father clapped him on the back, and his mother wiped tears from her eyes. Kaela's throat tightened. Mira Voss. Mira squeezed Kaela's arm once, then walked forward with her head high. The magic wrapped around her like silk, and when she returned to the crowd, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Happy tears. More names, more bonds. Sienna Crow. Garrett Stone. Lila Thorn. Kaela's breath caught. Lila was her cousin, younger by 2 years and bonding on her first ceremony. Lila walked forward with trembling hands, and when the magic settled over her, she let out a sob of relief. Kaela clapped with the others, but her hands felt numb. Davin March. Corey Ashwood. Nolan Gray. The list grew shorter. The firelight flickered. Kaela's hands were shaking now, but she kept them still, kept her face calm. Any moment now. Any moment, they'd call her name. She'd prepared for this. She'd trained, she'd studied the old histories, learned the rituals, practiced her breathing exercises. She'd done everything right. Loren Gray. The last name echoed across the clearing, and then silence. Kaela's stomach dropped. Elder Corwin lowered his hand. The bonding ceremony is complete. Those who have been chosen, step forward and take your place among Greystone's future. The newly bonded wolves moved toward the center of the clearing, laughing, embracing, their faces glowing with pride and relief. Kaela stood frozen. Her name hadn't been called. Around her, the unbonded began to shift, murmuring to each other in low, uncomfortable voices. There were always a few who didn't bond on the first ceremony, young wolves who needed another year to mature, to prove themselves. It wasn't shameful, just disappointing. But Kaela wasn't a first-timer. This was her third ceremony. She felt eyes on her now, pitying, dismissive. A few people glanced her way and quickly looked elsewhere, as if her failure might be contagious. Across the clearing, she saw Garrett Stone lean over and whisper something to Jax. They both looked at her and smirked. Mira caught her gaze from across the clearing and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Kaela turned and walked away before anyone could say anything else. She didn't go back to the main hall where the celebration would continue late into the night. She couldn't stomach it, the laughter, the toasts, the easy joy of people who belonged, people who had futures. Instead, she walked to the edge of the territory, to the narrow trail that led up to the ridge overlooking the valley. The air was colder here, sharp and clean, and the noise from the bonfire faded behind her with every step. When she reached the top, she stopped and looked out over the dark expanse of forest stretching away into the night. The trees went on forever, black and endless under the stars. 3 ceremonies. 3 times passed over. She told herself it didn't matter, that she'd try again, that maybe next time they'd see her differently. Maybe next time the magic would recognize whatever it was they were looking for. But tonight, standing alone on the ridge with the cold wind biting at her skin, she finally understood the truth. They didn't see her at all. To Greystone Pack, Kaela Thorn was already a ghost, already erased. She could stand in the middle of the bonfire and scream, and they still wouldn't notice her. A sound behind her made her turn. Her cousin Lila stood at the edge of the trail, her new bond mark still glowing faintly on her wrist, a delicate pattern of silver lines that marked her as Pack. "Kaela," Lila said softly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." "I know you wanted—" "I said don't be," Kaela repeated, and her voice came out harder than she meant it to. She took a breath. "Congratulations, you deserve it." Lila's face crumpled. "It's not fair. You've been waiting longer than anyone." "Life's not fair. But you work so hard. You're always helping people. Always." "It doesn't matter," Kaela said flatly. "Hard work doesn't mean anything if you're not strong enough. And apparently I'm not." "You are strong," Lila insisted. "You're one of the strongest people I know." Kaela almost laughed. "Then why didn't the magic choose me?" Lila didn't have an answer for that. They stood in silence for a moment, the wind rustling through the trees below. "Are you coming back to the celebration?" Lila asked finally. "No." "Kaela, go celebrate with your pack, Lila. I'll be fine." Lila hesitated, then nodded slowly. She turned to leave, then stopped. "You'll always have a place with us. Bond or no bond. You know that, right?" Kaela didn't answer. Lila walked back down the trail, and Kaela was alone again. She stayed on the ridge until the bonfire burned low and the voices faded. When she finally returned to the pack grounds, the clearing was nearly empty. A few stragglers remained, talking in quiet clusters, but most had gone to bed. Kaela moved through the shadows, heading toward the small cabin she shared with 2 other unbonded wolves. She was almost there when a voice stopped her. "Kaela." She turned. Elder Corwin stood a few paces away, his hands clasped behind his back. In the dim light, his face looked carved from stone. "Elder," Kaela said quietly. He studied her for a long moment. "You're disappointed." It wasn't a question. Kaela swallowed. "I don't understand. I've done everything right. I've trained. I've followed every ritual. You're weak." The word landed like a slap. Kaela stared at him. "What?" "You're weak," Corwin repeated, his tone matter-of-fact, like he was commenting on the weather. "You lack the strength to bond. The magic won't take hold in someone who doesn't have the force to anchor it. I'm sorry, child, but that's the truth." Something inside Kaela cracked. "I'm not weak," she said, and her voice came out harder than she'd intended. Corwin's expression didn't change. "The magic disagrees. The magic is wrong." The elder's eyes narrowed. "Careful," but Kaela couldn't stop now. The words were spilling out, hot and reckless, 3 years of swallowed hurt pouring out all at once. "I've been careful my whole life. I followed every rule, stayed quiet, didn't make trouble. And for what? To be told I'm not good enough? That I don't deserve a bond? Deserve has nothing to do with it, Corwin said coldly. The bond requires strength. You don't have it. That's not cruelty. That's reality.
Then what am I supposed to do? Kaela demanded. Just accept it? Spend the rest of my life being nothing? Accept it. Find another path. Not everyone is meant to be bonded. So I'm just, what? A servant? Someone to clean up after the real wolves? Corwin's gaze softened, but only slightly. You're unbonded. That's not nothing. But it's not the same. You can still serve the pack in other ways. We need people to maintain the grounds, to help with the children, to serve, Kaela interrupted. You mean serve. There's honor in service. There's honor in having a choice. Corwin sighed, and for the first time he looked tired. I understand you're upset, but throwing a tantrum won't change the facts. You're not strong enough to bond. You never will be. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can move on with your life. Kaela took a step back. No. Excuse me? No, she said again, louder this time. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being a servant to people who look at me like I'm broken. If I'm not good enough for Greystone, then Greystone isn't good enough for me. Corwin's face hardened. Watch yourself, girl. You're speaking to an elder. I'm speaking to someone who just told me I don't matter, Kaela shot back. Why should I watch myself for you? Because I could make your life very difficult. My life is already difficult, Kaela said. You just made sure of that. She turned on her heel and walked away. Where do you think you're going? Corwin called after her. She didn't answer. She walked away from Elder Corwin, away from the bonfire, away from the pack grounds. And she kept walking. Behind her, she heard him call her name one more time. Then nothing. What? By the time she reached the forest edge, her anger had burned down to something colder, something sharper. The wilderness beyond Greystone territory was dangerous. Everyone knew that. There were rogue wolves, wild predators, hostile packs that didn't ask questions before they attacked. Unbonded wolves didn't survive out there alone. The bond gave you strength, speed, healing. Without it, you were just human, breakable. But staying meant accepting a life of quiet erasure, of being nothing, of watching everyone around her move forward while she stayed frozen in place. Kaela looked back one last time at the distant glow of the bonfire. Then she stepped over the boundary line and into the trees. The forest swallowed her whole. The first night was the hardest. Kaela had no supplies, no plan, no idea where she was going. She just walked, putting as much distance as she could between herself and Greystone. Her feet ached, her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. When dawn broke, she found a narrow creek and drank until her stomach hurt. Then she kept moving. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and the anger in her chest. But anger, she was learning, could keep you warm. By the second day, hunger set in. She tried to hunt, the way she'd been taught in training, but she was clumsy and slow without the bond's enhancement. The deer she tracked heard her coming from a mile away. The rabbit she cornered slipped through her fingers like smoke. She found some berries that looked edible and ate them. They tasted bitter and made her stomach cramp, but she kept them down. By the third day, she was stumbling. Her body was shutting down. She knew that. The rational part of her mind, the part that had kept her alive this long, was screaming at her to turn back, to swallow her pride and beg Greystone to take her back. But she couldn't. She'd rather die out here than live as a ghost. On the fourth day, she smelled smoke. Kaela followed the scent through the trees, moving on instinct more than thought. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. Her legs felt like they were made of wood. She stumbled into a small clearing and saw him. An old man sat hunched over a dying fire, his back against a fallen log. His clothes were ragged, his face gaunt and pale. When he looked up at her, his eyes were clouded with pain. "Help," he rasped. "Please." Kaela should have kept walking. She had nothing to give. She could barely stand. Helping him would use up the last of her strength, and then what? They'd both die out here. But she didn't walk. She couldn't. She stumbled over to him and dropped to her knees. "What happened?" she asked, her voice rough. "Fell," the old man whispered. "Days ago. Can't move my leg." Kaela looked down and immediately wished she hadn't.
His leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, swollen to twice its normal size and turning dark purple, broken, badly. Infection had already set in. She could see the red line spreading up from the break, could smell the sickly sweet scent of rot. She had no medicine, no tools, no training for this. But she had hands, and she had stubbornness. Kaela tore strips from the bottom of her shirt, her fingers clumsy and shaking. She crawled to the creek, thank whatever gods were listening, there was a creek nearby, and soaked the fabric in cold water. Then she came back and started cleaning the wound as best she could. The old man screamed. "I'm sorry," Kaela whispered. I'm sorry. But she didn't stop. She worked through the pain in her own body, through the fog in her head. She rebuilt the fire, boiling water in a makeshift container she fashioned from bark and sealed with mud. She foraged for roots and herbs she half remembered from childhood lessons. Yarrow for bleeding, willow bark for pain, something that looked like comfrey for the swelling. She crushed them into a paste using a rock and spread it over the break, then wrapped the leg as tightly as she dared. She worked through the night. The old man slipped in and out of consciousness, muttering in his fever. Sometimes he called for someone named Marin. Sometimes he just whimpered. Kaela stayed awake, feeding the fire, keeping watch, checking his pulse every few minutes. By morning, she was seeing double. But the swelling had gone down. Not much, but enough. And the old man was still breathing. Kaela slumped against the log beside him and closed her eyes. Just for a minute, just to rest. Was, She woke to voices. Kayla's eyes snapped open, and she reached for a weapon she didn't have. Her body screamed in protest. Everything hurt. Her head was pounding, and her mouth tasted like death. 3 figures stood at the edge of the clearing, wolves. She could tell immediately from the way they moved, the way they held themselves. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to prove themselves. The one in front stepped closer, and Kaela got a good look at him. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that looked like they could see straight through you, maybe mid-30s. He wore travel-worn clothes, but they fit him like armor. Everything about him screamed power. He looked at the old man, then at Kaela, then at the makeshift bandages and the cold fire. "You did this?" he asked. His voice was low, calm. Not a threat. Not quite. Kayla's hand closed around a rock. "Who's asking?" The corner of his mouth twitched. Someone who's very interested in how an unbonded wolf kept Oren Vark alive for 4 days in the middle of nowhere. Vark. Kayla's stomach dropped. She'd heard that name before. Everyone had. "You're Blackridge," she said. "And you're Kaela Thorn," the man replied. "Greystone's most recent failure." The word should have stung, but Kaela was too tired to care. "If you're here to finish us off, get it over with," she said. The man laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Finish you off? You saved my uncle's life. Why would I finish you off?" Kaela blinked. "Your uncle? Oren," the man said, gesturing to the old man. "He went missing 5 days ago. We've been tracking him ever since." He crouched down, studying the bandages with something that looked like genuine interest. "This is good work, really good work, considering you had nothing to work with." "I did what I could." "You did more than that." He looked up at her, and his eyes were sharp. "You pushed past exhaustion, past hunger, past the point where most people would have given up. You saved a stranger's life even though it might have killed you. That's not nothing." Kaela didn't know what to say to that. The man stood. "My name is Riven Vark, and I think we need to talk." They made camp in the clearing while one of Riven's wolves, a younger man with a scar running down his jaw, tended to Oren. The other wolf, lean and quiet, brought Kaela food, real food, bread and dried meat and something that might have been cheese. Kaela ate like she was starving, because she was. Riven sat across the fire from her, watching. "Why did you leave Greystone, he asked. Kaela swallowed a mouthful of bread. "They didn't want me." "Because you're unbonded." "Because I'm weak," Kaela corrected bitterly. "That's what they said." Riven's expression didn't change. "And you believed them?" "The magic believed them. I couldn't bond. 3 ceremonies, 3 failures." "The bond isn't everything. Tell that to Greystone."
Riven leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. You want to know what I think? Not really. I think Greystone is run by idiots who wouldn't recognize real strength if it bit them. Kaela stared at him. What? You're not weak, Kaela. You're restrained. There's a difference. I don't understand. The bond works by amplifying what's already there, Riven explained. Strength, speed, aggression. It takes your instincts and magnifies them, but you... He tilted his head. You're not driven by instinct. You're driven by control, by careful thought, by restraint. The bond doesn't know what to do with that. Kaela's throat tightened. So I'm broken. So you're different, Riven said. And different doesn't mean useless. Tell that to Elder Corwin. Elder Corwin, Riven said flatly, is a fossil who's more interested in tradition than results. The bond is a tool. It's not the only tool. Kaela wanted to believe him, but 3 years of rejection had left scars. Why do you care? She asked. You don't know me. I know what you did for Orin, Riven said, and I know most wolves would have walked past him without a second thought. You didn't? That tells me something. Tells you what? That you have potential. There was that word again, potential. Kaela set down the bread. I'm not interested in being someone's project. Good, Riven said. Because I'm not interested in taking on a project. I'm interested in offering you a choice. What kind of choice? Riven leaned back. In 2 weeks, there's a continental summit. Every major pack on this side of the range will be there. Alphas, elders, power players. Blackridge is hosting. Kaela frowned. So I'm inviting you to come with me. She almost laughed. Why would you do that? Because I think watching you walk into a room full of alphas will be very entertaining, Riven said, and because I think you're capable of more than you know. But mostly? His eyes glinted. Because Greystone will be there, and I want to see their faces when the wolf they threw away walks in at my side. Kaela's breath caught. That's cruel, she said. That's justice, Riven countered. They erased you. I'm offering you the chance to make them regret it. And what do you get out of this? Entertainment. And maybe if I'm right about you, an ally. Kaela studied him. Riven Vark was dangerous. Anyone could see that. He was the kind of wolf who played games with people's lives and called it strategy, but he was also offering her something Greystone never had. A chance. If I say yes, Kaela said slowly, I'm not joining your pack. I wouldn't ask you to. And I'm not your weapon. Agreed. And if I don't like how things are going, I walk. No questions asked. Riven smiled. Deal. He held out his hand. Kaela looked at it for a long moment. Then she reached out and shook it. All right, she said. I'll come to your summit, but after that, we're done. After that, Riven said, we'll see. They traveled for 3 days. Orin was stable enough to move, though he had to be carried on a makeshift stretcher. Kaela walked beside him, checking his bandages, making sure the infection wasn't spreading. The old man was awake more now. He watched her with sharp, knowing eyes. You're not what I expected, he said on the second day. What did you expect? Someone harder, angrier? Kaela smiled faintly. Give me time. Orin chuckled, then winced. My nephew likes you. Your nephew is using me. Of course he is, but that doesn't mean he doesn't like you. Orin's expression grew serious. Riven sees things others don't. It's his gift and his curse. What do you mean? He sees potential where others see nothing. He sees patterns where others see chaos. But sometimes, Orin trailed off. Sometimes he pushes too hard, expects too much. Don't let him break you, girl. I don't break, Kaela said. Good, Orin said. You're going to need that. Ampa? Masata. On the third day, they reached Blackridge territory. Kaela had expected something grim and forbidding. What she got was a sprawling compound built into the side of a mountain with high walls and watchtowers and more people than she'd ever seen in one place. Everyone stopped what they were doing to watch them enter. Kaela kept her head up and her eyes forward. Riven led her through the compound to a guest house near the center. It was small but clean, with a real bed and a fireplace. Rest, he said. We have a lot of work to do before the summit. What kind of work? Riven's smile was sharp.
The kind that turns rejected wolves into people no one can ignore. He left before she could ask what that meant. Kaela sat down on the bed and stared at her hands. They were still shaking, but not from weakness now. From something else. Something that felt almost like hope. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just taken the first step toward becoming something Greystone could never have imagined. Something unstoppable. Outside, the sun was setting over Blackridge territory, and somewhere in the distance, wolves were howling. Kaela closed her eyes and listened. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The training grounds at Blackridge were nothing like Greystone's carefully manicured practice fields. This was raw dirt and stone, with equipment that looked like it had survived a war. Maybe it had. Kaela stood in the center of the ring, trying not to look as out of place as she felt. Around the perimeter, Blackridge wolves had gathered to watch. Word had spread fast. Riven Vark's mysterious guest, the unbonded failure from Greystone, was about to get tested. Most of them looked amused. A few looked openly hostile. Riven stood with his arms crossed, watching her with that same calculating expression he always wore. Beside him was the scarred wolf from the forest. His name was Dane, Kaela had learned. The lean one was called Soren. "You can still back out," Dane said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No shame in knowing your limits." Except there was. They all knew it. Kaela met his eyes. "I'm not backing out. Your funeral." A woman stepped into the ring across from Kaela. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, with roped muscle and a bond mark that glowed faintly even in daylight. Her name was Vera, and she looked at Kaela the way you'd look at a bug you were about to step on. "You sure about this, little rabbit?" Vera asked. Kaela didn't answer. She'd learned in the past 3 days that talking just gave people more ammunition. Riven raised his hand. "Standard rules? First blood or submission. Begin." Vera moved. Fast. Faster than Kaela expected, even though she'd been warned about bond-enhanced speed. 1 second Vera was across the ring, the next she was right in front of Kaela, her fist driving toward Kayla's face. Kaela ducked, not because she was fast, because she'd seen Vera's weight shift a split second before the punch came. The fist whistled over her head, and Kaela drove her shoulder into Vera's midsection, using the larger woman's momentum against her. Vera stumbled back, surprised. The watching wolves muttered. "Lucky," Vera said, rolling her shoulders. "Let's see if you can do it twice." She came in again, faster this time, throwing combinations that would have dropped a normal opponent in seconds. Kaela dodged, ducked, blocked what she couldn't avoid. Her arms were going to be black and blue tomorrow, but she stayed on her feet. Because she wasn't trying to match Vera's strength. She was trying to read her. Every fighter had patterns. Tells. Vera dropped her left shoulder before she threw a right hook. She always followed a jab with a cross. She favored her right leg. Kaela waited. Vera threw the jab. Kaela slipped it, saw the cross coming, and instead of blocking, she stepped inside Vera's guard and drove her elbow into the larger woman's ribs. Vera grunted, and for just a second her eyes widened. Then her fist caught Kaela in the jaw and sent her sprawling. Kaela hit the dirt hard enough to knock the wind out of her lungs. Her vision sparkled. The taste of copper flooded her mouth. "Stay down," Vera said, breathing hard. "You made your point." Kaela spat blood into the dirt and pushed herself to her knees. "I'm not done." "Kid, I just rang your bell. Stay down." Kaela stood. Her legs shook, but they held. Vera's expression shifted from annoyance to something almost like respect. "You're stubborn, I'll give you that. I've been called worse." They circled each other. This time, when Vera came in, there was less arrogance in her movements. She was taking Kaela seriously now. They traded blows. Kaela was slower, weaker, but she was learning Vera's rhythm, anticipating her moves. She couldn't win, not in a straight fight, but she could make Vera work for it. She lasted 90 seconds before Vera caught her with a sweep that took her legs out from under her. Kaela hit the ground again, and this time Vera's knee pressed against her chest, pinning her. "Yield," Vera said. Kaela wanted to keep fighting. Every instinct screamed at her to keep going, but that would be stupid. "I yield," she said. Vera stood and offered her hand. Kaela took it, and the larger woman pulled her to her feet. "Not bad," Vera said quietly, "for an unbonded." It wasn't much, but coming from her it felt like a victory. The watching wolves dispersed, most of them shaking their heads. Kaela heard mutters of waste of time and charity case. But a few of them looked thoughtful. Riven walked over. Well? Kaela wiped blood from her lip. Well, what? How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck. Good. That means you're paying attention. He nodded toward the edge of the training ground. Come on. We need to talk. Riven's office was in the main hall, a sprawling stone building that looked like it had been carved out of the mountain itself. Inside, the walls were lined with maps and books, and a fire crackled in a massive hearth. Kaela sat in a chair that was too big for her, still tasting blood. Riven poured 2 glasses of something amber and handed her one. She took it without asking what it was and drank. It burned all the way down, but in a good way. You did well today, Riven said. I lost. You lasted 90 seconds against a bonded fighter with twice your strength and 10 times your experience. That's not losing. That's learning. Kaela set the glass down. What's the point of all this? The summit's in a week. I'm not going to become a fighter in a week. You're not supposed to become a fighter, Riven said. You're supposed to become dangerous. There's a difference? A fighter wins with strength. Someone dangerous wins because people underestimate them. He leaned back. Greystone dismissed you because they couldn't see past the bond. They looked at you and saw weakness. I look at you and see someone who survived 4 days in the wilderness, saved a dying man, and just went toe-to-toe with Vera without backing down. That's not weakness. That's steel wrapped in quiet. Kaela didn't know what to say to that. The summit isn't about fighting, Riven continued. It's about power, politics, reading the room. You don't need to be the strongest person there. You just need to be the one they can't ignore. And how do I do that? Riven smiled. You stop apologizing for existing. Over the next 6 days, Kaela learned more than she had in 3 years at Greystone. She trained with Vera every morning, getting her body used to the rhythm of real combat. She studied maps with Soren, learning the territories, the pack alliances, the old feuds that simmered beneath every political interaction. She ate meals with the Blackridge Wolves and listened to their conversations, picking up the unspoken rules of pack dynamics. And every evening she sat with Riven and learned how to read people. Watch their hands, he told her. People lie with their words, but their hands tell the truth. If someone's nervous, they fidget. If they're angry, their hands clench. If they're lying, they touch their face. What if they know you're watching? Then they try to control it, and that tells you something too. Kaela practiced on everyone she met. She watched Dane's shoulders tense when someone mentioned his brother. She saw the way Soren's eyes went distant when people talked about the Eastern Territories. She noticed that Vera only smiled when she thought no one was looking. She learned to see beneath the surface. On the 5th day, Oren found her in the library. The old man was moving better now, using a cane but walking on his own. He lowered himself into the chair across from her with a grunt. You're starting to fit in here, he observed. Kaela looked up from the book she'd been reading, A History of Continental Pack Politics. I'm trying not to embarrass Riven. You're doing more than that. Oren studied her. You're changing. Into what? Something Greystone would never have let you become. Kaela closed the book. Oren, can I ask you something? Of course. Why is Riven really doing this? He says it's about proving Greystone wrong, but she shook her head. There's something else. Oren was quiet for a moment. My nephew has many talents, but his greatest one is seeing the cracks in things, in systems, in hierarchies, in people. He met her eyes. He sees the cracks in the way packs operate, the old traditions that don't serve anyone anymore, the bond being treated as the only measure of worth. And I'm what? A symbol? You're proof, Oren said. Proof that the system is broken, that strength comes in forms the elders refuse to recognize. He leaned forward. Riven isn't trying to fix you, Kaela. He's trying to use you to break something much bigger. What if I don't want to be used? Then you leave, Oren said simply. He gave you that choice, didn't he? And he'll honor it. But I don't think you want to leave. Why not? Because for the first time in your life, someone is betting on you instead of against you, and you want to see if they're right. Kaela couldn't argue with that. The night before the summit, Kaela couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Greystone, about Elder Corwin's dismissive tone, about her cousin Lila's pitying face, about 3 years of being invisible. Tomorrow she'd walk into a room full of the most powerful wolves on the continent, and Greystone would be there. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went for a walk. The Blackridge compound was quieter at night, but there were still wolves on patrol, still lights in windows. This wasn't a pack that ever fully rested. She found herself at the eastern wall, looking out over the valley below. The moon was almost full, turning everything silver. Couldn't sleep either? Kaela turned. Riven stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. Too much thinking, she admitted. About tomorrow? About what happens if I fail, if I freeze up, or say the wrong thing, or prove everyone right about me being weak. Riven moved to stand beside her. You want to know a secret? What? They're already afraid of you. Kaela almost laughed. Who? Greystone. The other packs who've heard you're coming, they're afraid because you're unpredictable. You don't fit into their boxes. That makes you dangerous. I don't feel dangerous. I feel terrified. Good, Riven said. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it control you. They stood in silence for a moment. Riven, Kaela said quietly, what happens after the summit, after you've made your point? That depends on you. What do you mean? He looked at her. I told you I'd give you a choice. I meant it. If you want to leave after tomorrow, you can. No strings. I'll even give you supplies, money, whatever you need. But if you stay, he trailed off. If I stay? If you stay, I'm going to teach you how to reshape the world that threw you away, how to build something better, something that doesn't measure worth by magic alone. His eyes were intense. But only if that's what you want. Kaela's heart was pounding. You're talking about changing the entire pack system. I'm talking about evolution. The world is changing whether the elders like it or not. I'd rather be ahead of it than crushed by it. And you think I can help with that? I think you're exactly the kind of wolf who can show others there's another way. He smiled slightly. But like I said, that's only if you want it. Kaela looked out at the valley, at the endless dark forest beyond. A week ago, she'd walked into those trees ready to die. Now she was standing on a wall, talking about changing the world. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly what she wanted. Ask me again after tomorrow, she said. Riven nodded. Fair enough. The summit hall was built into the side of a cliff, a massive structure of stone and timber that could hold 1,000 wolves. By the time Kaela arrived with Riven's delegation, it was already half full. She'd never seen so many alphas in one place. They stood in clusters, talking in low voices, their bond marks glowing with power. These were wolves who commanded territories, who held the lives of hundreds in their hands. Even the way they stood radiated dominance. Kaela felt like an insect among giants. Breathe, Riven murmured beside her. And remember, half of them are idiots hiding behind tradition. That helped a little. They moved through the crowd. Wolves turned to look at them. At Riven first, because he was impossible to ignore, but then their eyes slid to Kaela. She felt them assessing her, dismissing her. Good. Let them underestimate her. Riven Vark, a voice boomed, always making an entrance. A massive wolf pushed through the crowd, easily the biggest man Kaela had ever seen, with a beard like a storm cloud and a laugh that could shake walls. His bond mark covered half his forearm. Marcus, Riven said smoothly. Good to see you. Is it? Marcus's eyes slid to Kaela. And who's this? Don't tell me you've finally taken a mate. This is Kaela Thorn, Riven said. She's with Blackridge for the summit. Marcus frowned. Thorn? Any relation to the Greystone Thorns? Kaela's jaw tightened. Used to be. Used to be, Marcus repeated, and his grin widened. Oh, this should be interesting. Does Corwin know you're here? Not yet, Riven said, and there was something dangerous in his smile. Marcus threw back his head and laughed. You magnificent bastard! You're going to start a war. I'm going to start a conversation, Riven corrected. There's a difference. They moved on, and Kaela felt Marcus's eyes on her back. More introductions followed. Alphas, elders, power brokers. Most of them looked at Kaela like she was furniture. A few asked pointed questions about her bond status, which Riven deflected with practiced ease. And then she saw them. The Greystone delegation stood near the eastern wall, Elder Corwin, 2 younger elders, and a handful of bonded wolves, including Jax and Garrett. And Lila, Kaela's cousin, spotted her at the same moment. Lila's eyes went wide and she grabbed Corwin's sleeve, saying something urgent. Corwin turned. His face went through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, recognition, and then something cold and hard. He started walking toward them. "Here we go," Riven murmured. Corwin stopped a few paces away, his delegation forming up behind him. His eyes fixed on Kaela with barely concealed contempt. "Miss Thorn," he said flatly, "I'm surprised to see you here." "Elder Corwin," Kaela replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm surprised you remember my name." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "What are you doing at a continental summit? This gathering is for bonded wolves and pack leadership." "She's here as my guest," Riven said smoothly. "Is that a problem?" "Your guest," Corwin repeated. His eyes narrowed. "What game are you playing, Vark?" "No game. Kaela saved one of my people. I'm repaying the favor." By bringing an unbonded failure to a summit? By parading her in front of the continent's leadership? Corwin's voice rose slightly. "This is a mockery." "The only mockery here," Riven said, his voice going cold, "is a pack that throws away wolves with real potential because they don't fit an outdated mold." The hall had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. Corwin's face flushed. "You know nothing about Greystone's standards. I know you rejected one of the strongest wolves I've met in years because you're too blind to see strength when it doesn't come wrapped in a bond." "She's weak," Corwin snapped. "The magic itself rejected her 3 times." "The magic," Riven said softly, "doesn't know everything. It knows enough. She has no place here." "Then why are you so threatened by her presence?" The question hung in the air like a knife. Corwin's hands clenched. "I'm not threatened by a child who couldn't even—" "She saved a man's life using nothing but will and intelligence," Riven interrupted. "What have you done lately besides tell talented wolves they're worthless?" Corwin took a step forward. "You're out of line, Vark, and you're afraid," Riven said. "Afraid that if wolves like Kaela start proving themselves without bonds, your entire power structure collapses. Because what are you without the magic? Just old men clinging to tradition." "How dare you!" "Enough!" The word cracked through the hall like thunder. Everyone turned. An elderly woman stood at the far end of the hall, leaning on a staff that looked older than the building. Her hair was white as snow, her face lined with age, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. High Elder Marin, the oldest living wolf on the continent, the one voice that could silence any alpha. She walked forward slowly, and the crowd parted like water. "If you children are done posturing," she said dryly, "we have actual business to discuss." Her eyes landed on Kaela. "And you, unbonded girl, come here." Kayla's throat went dry, but she walked forward. Marin studied her with those ancient eyes. "What's your name?" "Kaela Thorn, High Elder." "And why are you here, Kaela Thorn?" Kaela glanced at Riven, but his expression said this was her moment, her choice. She looked back at Marin. "Because I was told I didn't belong anywhere, and I wanted to see if that was true." "And? Is it?" Kaela thought about the past week, about Vera's grudging respect, about Orin's knowing smile, about Riven betting on her when no one else would. "No," she said quietly. "It's not." Marin's lips twitched. "Good answer." She turned to Corwin. "This is the wolf you rejected?" Corwin's jaw worked. "She couldn't bond, High Elder. 3 ceremonies. I didn't ask for excuses. I asked if this was the wolf you rejected." "Yes." Marin looked at Kaela again, then at Riven, then back at Corwin. "Interesting." She turned and walked back toward her seat. "We'll discuss this later. For now, everyone sit down. We have territorial disputes to settle, and I'm too old to waste time on pack drama." The crowd dispersed, but Kaela could feel the weight of every eye in the room. Riven touched her elbow lightly. "Come on, we need to take our seats." As they walked away, Kaela glanced back. Lila was staring at her with an expression Kaela couldn't quite read, and Elder Corwin looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Good." Checked. The summit sessions were mind-numbingly boring. Territorial disputes, trade agreements, ancient blood feuds that no one could even remember the cause of anymore. Kaela sat in the Blackridge section and tried to follow along, but most of it went over her head. She'd never realized how much of pack politics was just alphas arguing about whose grandfather insulted whose great-uncle 50 years ago. But she paid attention to how they argued, the body language, the alliances, who deferred to who had real power versus who just talked loud. During a break, Vera sat down next to her. "You're taking notes. Mental ones. Smart. Most wolves don't bother learning this stuff unless they have to. I figure if I'm going to be here, I should understand what's happening." Vera studied her. "You know, half these alphas want you gone, right? They think Riven bringing you here is an insult to the entire system." "I know." "Doesn't bother you?" Kaela shrugged. "They already thought I was worthless. At least now they know my name." Vera laughed. "Fair point." The sessions resumed, more arguing, more posturing, and then they got to the territorial dispute between Iron Peak and Silvermere. It was the same old argument they'd had for decades, apparently, a patch of forest on the border that both packs claimed neither would yield. The two alphas stood and rehashed the same tired points their predecessors had made for generations. Kaela listened, frowning. Something about it didn't make sense. She leaned over to Riven. "Why don't they just share it?" He glanced at her. "What?" "The forest. Both packs claim it, but neither seems to actually use it for anything. Why not just declare it neutral ground? Let both packs hunt there, but neither can settle it." Riven's eyes sharpened. "That's stupid," Kaela said. "Brilliant," Riven corrected, "but you'd have to convince them to abandon a century of pride." "Pride is expensive. How many wolves have died fighting over that forest?" 17 in the last 20 years. So they value pride more than 17 lives. That seems insane. Riven smiled slowly. "You want to suggest it?" Kaela's heart jumped. "What? No, I can't. Why not?" "Because I'm unbonded. Because I'm nobody. Because you're afraid they'll dismiss you?" Riven leaned closer. "They already dismissed you. What do you have to lose?" Kaela looked at the arguing alphas, at the bored faces around the room, at Elder Corwin, who was watching her with narrowed eyes. What did she have to lose? She stood up. The room didn't notice at first, but Riven stood with her, and that got attention. "Hi, Elder," Riven called out. "If I may, Miss Thorn has an observation." Every eye in the hall turned to Kaela. Her mouth went dry, her hands started to shake, but she didn't sit down. Marin looked at her with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Speak, child," Kaela cleared her throat. "I'm sorry for interrupting, but I was listening to the Iron Peak Silvermere dispute, and I had a question." The Iron Peak Alpha, a scarred man named Reeve, scowled. "What question could an unbonded wolf possibly have about territorial law?" "Why are you fighting?" Kaela asked. The room went silent. "Excuse me?" Reeve said dangerously. "I mean, I understand the forest is disputed, but what I don't understand is why. Neither pack actually uses it. You don't settle there, you barely hunt there, so why are you willing to let wolves die over it?" "It's our land," the Silvermere Alpha said, a woman named Kira with ice in her voice. "It's been our land for 3 generations." "It's our land," Reeve shot back. "Your grandfather stole it from—" "My grandfather did no such—" "Stop," Kaela said. Both alphas stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "I'm sorry," Kaela said, "but this is ridiculous. You're arguing over who owned land 100 years ago while wolves die today. What if you just stopped?" "Stopped?" Kira repeated. "Make it neutral territory. Let both packs use it, but neither owns it. Problem solved." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Reeve laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. "You think we haven't thought of that? You think no one in a century has suggested neutrality? Then why hasn't it happened?" "Because," Kira said coldly, "yielding ground is weakness, and weakness invites aggression." "But you're not yielding," Kaela said. "Neither of you are. You're both agreeing to share something neither of you can hold alone." "That's compromise," Reeve said, "which is the same as weakness." "No," Kaela said, and her voice came out harder than she expected. "Weakness is watching your wolves die for pride.
Strength is being smart enough to find another way. The room erupted. Half the alphas started shouting, some at Kaela, some at each other, some at Riven for letting her speak. Merrin slammed her staff against the floor, and the crack echoed like a gunshot. "Quiet!" The room fell silent.
Merrin stood, and despite her age, she seemed to fill the space. "The unbonded child makes a fair point." More muttering. "She oversteps," Corwin said. "She has no right to speak on matters of—" "She has the right I grant her," Merrin said flatly. "And she's said more sense in 30 seconds than you've all managed in 30 years. She turned to Reeve and Kira. "What say you? Will you consider the proposal?" Reeve looked like he'd bitten into something sour. We'll consider it," Kira said, and her eyes were calculating as they studied Kaela. "It has merit." Merrin nodded. "Good. We'll table this dispute for now and revisit it tomorrow." She looked at Kaela. "Well spoken, child. You may sit." Kaela sat down fast, her legs shaking. Riven leaned over. "Not bad for your first summit." "I think I'm going to throw up." "Later. Right now, you need to look confident." Kaela forced her spine straight and her face calm, even though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. Around the room, wolves were staring at her, some with anger, some with confusion. But a few, just a few, were looking at her with something that might have been respect. And across the hall, Elder Corwin's face was carved from stone. The session ended shortly after. As people filed out, Kaela was swarmed. Other alphas wanted to talk to her, question her, figure out what game she was playing. Riven ran interference, but even he couldn't shield her from everyone. An older alpha named Thorn, no relation, cornered her near the exit. "That was either very brave or very stupid," he said. "Probably both," Kaela admitted. He smiled. "I like you. You're not afraid to look foolish. I've had practice." "Good. The continent needs more wolves willing to look foolish in service of sense." He nodded and walked away. Kaela finally escaped to the courtyard outside the hall. The air was cold and clean, and she gulped it down like water. Footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting Riven. It was Lila. Her cousin stood a few feet away, wringing her hands. "Kaela, can we talk?" Kaela wanted to say no, wanted to walk away, but she nodded. Lila stepped closer. "I'm sorry for what Elder Corwin said in there, for what happened at the ceremony, for all of it. It's not your fault. I should have said something. I should have defended you." "You were bonded," Kaela said quietly. "You had your own future to think about. I don't blame you." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "I missed you. After you left, everything felt wrong." "Did it?" "Yes. People kept saying it was for the best, that you'd be happier somewhere else, but—" Lila shook her head. "You're my family, and we just let you go." Kaela's throat tightened. "I chose to leave. Because we made you feel like you had to." That was true, and they both knew it. "What you did in there," Lila said, "that was incredible. I've never seen anyone talk to alphas like that." "I was terrified. You didn't look it." Lila smiled weakly. "You look strong, like you finally found where you belong." "I don't know where I belong yet," Kaela admitted, "but I'm starting to figure out where I don't." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Lila hugged her, quick and fierce, and walked away before Kaela could respond. Kaela stood alone in the courtyard, her chest tight with emotions she didn't have names for. "That was kind of you." She turned. Merrin stood in the doorway, leaning on her staff. "Hi, Elder," Kaela said, straightening. "I didn't see you there." "I'm old, not invisible." Merrin walked forward slowly. "That girl loves you." "I know. But she's not strong enough to stand with you. Not yet." Kaela frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Merrin said, "that you're about to make powerful enemies, and only the strong will be willing to stand beside you when that happens." "I didn't mean to—" "Yes, you did," Merrin interrupted gently. "Maybe not consciously, but you walked into that hall and challenged 100 years of tradition. That takes either courage or stupidity, and I don't think you're stupid." Kaela didn't know what to say. Merrin studied her with those ageless eyes.
The bond isn't everything, child. I've known that for longer than you've been alive, but the others... She shook her head. They've built their entire world on that foundation. Suggesting it might be flawed terrifies them. I wasn't trying to terrify anyone. I know, you were trying to solve a problem, but sometimes solving problems means breaking systems, and people don't like that. So what do I do? Marin smiled faintly. You keep being brave. Keep asking the questions no one else will ask, and when they try to tear you down, and they will, you stand your ground. I'm not strong enough for that. You're stronger than you think. You survived Greystone's rejection. You survived the wilderness. You walked into a room full of alphas and told them they were wrong. Marin's eyes glinted. That's not weakness, child. That's power they don't understand yet.
She turned and walked back toward the hall, her staff clicking against stone. Kaela stood alone in the courtyard, her mind spinning. She'd come to the summit expecting to be ignored, dismissed, maybe laughed at. Instead, she'd started something that couldn't be taken back. Behind her, the hall doors opened. Riven stepped out. There you are. We need to talk. About? About what happens next, he said. Because after that display, every pack on the continent is going to be watching you, and some of them aren't going to like what they see. Kaela's hands curled into fists. Let them watch. Riven's smile was sharp and proud. There's the wolf I've been waiting for. They tried to kill her that night. Kaela woke to the sound of her window shattering. She rolled off the bed on pure instinct, hitting the floor as something whistled through the space where her head had been a second before. A crossbow bolt buried itself in the headboard. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She scrambled toward the door, but it burst open before she reached it. Two figures in dark clothes rushed in. No faces visible, no bond marks glowing. Hired thugs, not pack wolves. The first one lunged at her with a knife. Kaela grabbed the chair beside her bed and swung it with everything she had. It connected with the attacker's shoulder, sending him stumbling back. The second one was faster. He caught her wrist, twisted hard. Pain shot up her arm and she gasped, dropping to one knee. Then the window exploded inward again, and Vera came through it like a thunderbolt. She hit the second attacker with a tackle that sent them both crashing into the wall. The man's head cracked against stone, and he went limp. The first attacker recovered and raised his knife, but Dane appeared in the doorway with a blade of his own. The fight lasted maybe 3 seconds before the attacker was on the ground, bleeding from a shoulder wound. Kaela sat on the floor, breathing hard, her wrists throbbing. You all right? Vera asked, already checking the unconscious man for weapons. I think so. What? Someone hired muscle to take you out, Dane said flatly. He pressed his boot against the wounded attacker's chest. Who sent you? The man spat blood. Don't know. Got paid in advance. Never saw a face. Convenient, Vera muttered. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Riven appeared with Soren and 3 other Blackridge wolves, all armed. His eyes went to Kaela first, scanning for injuries, then to the attackers. Get them to the cells, he said. Find out who's paying them. I don't care what you have to do. Dane and Soren dragged the attackers out. The other wolves spread out, checking the room and the corridor. Riven knelt beside Kaela. Are you hurt? My wrist. But I'm okay. He took her arm gently, probing the joint. She winced. Sprained, not broken. Vera, get the healer. On it. Vera disappeared. Yeets. Riven helped Kaela to her feet. Her legs were shaking, but they held. This was because of what I said today, wasn't it? Probably. Someone wants me dead because I suggested sharing a forest. Someone wants you dead because you made them look stupid in front of the entire continent, Riven corrected. The forest was just the excuse. Kaela's hands curled into fists. Who? Could be anyone. Corwin, Reeve, someone who thinks unbonded wolves stepping out of line sets a bad precedent. He met her eyes. I'm sorry. I should have seen this coming. You're not responsible for... Yes, I am. I brought you here. I put you in front of those wolves knowing some of them would hate you for it. His jaw tightened. This is my fault. No, Kaela said firmly. This is the fault of whoever hired those men, not you. The healer arrived, an older woman named Iris who wrapped Kaela's wrist with brisk efficiency and gave her something bitter to drink for the pain. By the time she finished, dawn was breaking outside the shattered window. Riven dismissed everyone except Vera, then turned to Kaela. You're not safe here anymore. Not until we know who's behind this. So what do we do? You have two options. One, I send you somewhere secure until this blows over. Somewhere far from the summit, far from pack politics. You'll be safe, but you'll miss the rest of the sessions. And option two? Riven's smile was grim. You stay. You walk into that hall this morning like nothing happened. You show them that trying to kill you only made you more dangerous. That's insane. Probably, but it's also the only way to find out who's behind this. Whoever paid those thugs will be watching to see if you show up. Their reaction will tell us what we need to know. Kaela looked at her bandaged wrist, at the crossbow bolt still embedded in her headboard, at Vera's carefully neutral expression. Every rational part of her said to take option one, to hide, to survive. But she'd spent 3 years hiding at Greystone, trying not to be noticed, and where had that gotten her? I'm staying, she said. Vera's eyebrows rose. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Riven studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but from now on, you don't go anywhere without an escort, and you sleep in the main hall with the rest of the Black Ridge wolves. No more isolated rooms. Fine. And Kaela? His voice went soft. If you change your mind, that's okay too. There's no shame in staying alive. I know, she said, but I'm tired of just staying alive. I want to actually live. Something shifted in Riven's expression. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. All right then, he said. Let's go make some enemies nervous. Walking into the summit hall that morning felt like walking into a trap. Every eye turned to Kaela the moment she appeared. She kept her chin up, her expression calm, even though her heart was trying to punch through her ribcage. Vera walked on her left, Dane on her right, and Riven just behind. A clear message. Touch her, and you'll have to go through all of us. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kaela caught fragments. Heard there was an attack. Crossbow bolt through the window. Still showed up, can you believe? She could believe it. She was living it. High Elder Merrin was already seated, her ancient eyes tracking Kaela's progress across the hall. When Kaela reached the Black Ridge section, Merrin nodded once. Acknowledgement, maybe. Or approval. Kaela sat down and tried not to look at the Greystone delegation, but she could feel Corwin's stare like a brand between her shoulder blades. The morning session began with trade disputes. Boring, technical, easy to tune out. Kaela used the time to study the room, looking for reactions. Who seemed nervous? Who avoided looking at her? Who kept glancing her way? There. A wolf from the Iron Peak delegation, sitting 3 rows back. He kept fidgeting with his bond mark, his eyes darting between Kaela and his alpha. When he noticed her watching, he looked away fast. Kaela filed that away. The session droned on. Then, just before the midday break, High Elder Merrin stood. Before we adjourn, she said, I'd like to address the incident that occurred last night. The hall went silent. Kaela Thorn, an unbonded guest of Black Ridge Pack, was attacked in her quarters by hired mercenaries. The attack was clearly an assassination attempt. Shocked murmurs. A few wolves who apparently hadn't heard the news yet looked genuinely surprised. Let me be clear, Merrin continued, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Whatever your opinions on tradition, on bonds, on the words spoken in this hall, violence against a guest under summit truce is unacceptable. Whoever ordered this attack has violated the oldest law we have. She paused, letting that sink in. If the responsible party comes forward now, the punishment will be exile. If I have to find you myself, it will be death. No one moved. No one spoke. Merrin's eyes swept the room. You have until sunset tomorrow. After that, I start looking. She sat down, and the session broke for lunch. Kaela stood on shaking legs, surrounded immediately by Black Ridge wolves. They moved her out of the hall quickly, but not before she caught a glimpse of Corwin's face. He looked furious. And maybe, just maybe, afraid. Lunch was a tense affair in a private room. Riven paced while the others ate. Kaela picked at her food, her appetite gone. Merrin's move was smart, Soren said quietly. Puts the pressure on whoever's behind this. They'll have to either turn themselves in or risk her wrath. They'll try to run, Dane said. Or hire someone else to finish the job. Not with Marin watching, Vera countered. No one's that stupid.
You'd be surprised, Riven muttered.
He stopped pacing and looked at Kaela. How are you holding up?
I'm fine. You're not fine. You almost died last night.
But I didn't. Kaela set down her fork. And I'm not going to hide while someone gets away with trying to kill me.
What are you suggesting?
Kaela hadn't really thought it through, but as she said it, the idea crystallized. I'm suggesting we find out who's behind this ourselves, before Marin's deadline, before they have a chance to run or cover their tracks. How? Soren asked. The fidgety wolf from Iron Peak, 3rd row, bond mark on his right forearm. He was nervous during Marin's announcement, really nervous. Riven's eyes sharpened. You think he knows something? I think he looked guilty and scared. Could just be general fear of Marin, Dane pointed out. Could be, but it's worth checking. Riven considered this, then nodded slowly. All right. Soren, find out who that wolf is. Discreetly. We'll approach him tonight, away from the others. And if he doesn't talk? Vera asked. Then we move on to the next suspect, Riven said. But my gut says Kaela's right. Whoever hired those thugs is panicking right now, and panicked wolves make mistakes. Bisa. They found out the nervous wolf's name was Colin, a mid-ranking member of Iron Peak's delegation. According to Soren's digging, he had gambling debts and a reputation for taking bribes. That evening, Riven and Kaela cornered him in a quiet corridor. Colin went white when he saw them. I don't know anything. Relax, Riven said smoothly. We just want to talk. About what? About who paid you to arrange last night's attack. Colin's face went from white to green. I don't know what you're talking about. Kaela stepped forward. You were sweating through your shirt during Marin's announcement. You looked at me 16 times during lunch, and right now your hands are shaking. She kept her voice calm, matter of fact. You're involved. The question is how much. I didn't hire anyone to kill you, Colin said desperately. I swear. But you know who did, Riven said. Colin's eyes darted to the corridor behind them. If I tell you, they'll kill me. If you don't tell us, Marin will kill you, Kaela pointed out. At least with us, you have a chance. Colin squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened them, they were wet. I just passed along a message, that's all. Someone wanted to know which room you were staying in, and I needed the money. Who? Riven's voice went cold. I don't know his name, just a contact. He paid me in gold, told me to keep quiet and describe him. Old, white hair, had this... Colin touched his neck. A scar here. Talked like an elder. Kaela's stomach dropped. Elder Corwin has a scar on his neck. No, Colin said quickly. Not Corwin. Someone else. I'd never seen him before. But he was Greystone? Riven pressed. I think so. He didn't say, but the way he talked about unbonded wolves... Colin swallowed. He hated them. Really hated them. A cold feeling settled in Kaela's chest. There are 3 elders in the Greystone delegation, Corwin and 2 others. Colin nodded miserably. The contact might have been one of them, or someone working for them. I don't know. I'm sorry, I just needed the money. The Riven grabbed Colin by the front of his shirt. You sold information that almost got someone killed for gambling debts. I know. I'm sorry. You're going to High Elder Marin tomorrow morning, Riven said. You're going to tell her everything you just told us, and you're going to pray she shows mercy. She'll exile me. Better than what I'll do if you run. Riven released him, and Colin slumped against the wall. Kaela felt sick. One of Greystone's elders tried to have me killed. Maybe, Riven said, or someone setting them up. Either way, we need proof before we accuse anyone. How do we get proof? We rattle some cages, see who jumps. The evening session was smaller, just the alphas and their senior advisors. Kaela wasn't supposed to attend, but Riven insisted she come as part of Blackridge's delegation. The moment they walked in, Kaela felt the tension spike. Elder Corwin was there, along with the 2 other Greystone elders, Elder Thane, a thin man with sharp features, and Elder Marrow, older and rounder with a scar on his neck. Kaela's eyes locked on that scar. Marrow noticed her staring and his expression hardened. The session began. More territorial disputes, more trade negotiations. Kaela barely heard any of it. She was watching Marrow, cataloging every gesture, every expression. Halfway through the session, Riven stood. "High Elder, if I may. I have information regarding last night's attack." Every head turned. Marin's eyes narrowed. "Speak." "A witness has come forward, someone who was paid to provide information to the attackers. He's willing to testify that the person who hired him matches the description of someone in this room." Chaos erupted. Alphas shouted questions. Elders demanded to know who. Marin slammed her staff down twice before order was restored. "Who is this witness?" Marin demanded. "Colin of Iron Peak. He'll present himself to you tomorrow morning." The Iron Peak Alpha, Reeve, looked murderous. "My Colin?" "Your Colin," Riven confirmed. "He was paid gold to reveal which room Kaela was staying in. The person who paid him was described as elderly, with white hair and a scar on his neck." Every eye in the room went to Elder Marrow. Marrow stood slowly, his face red. "This is an outrage. I would never—" "Then you won't mind submitting to questioning," Marin said. "I absolutely mind. This is clearly a setup by Vark to—" "To what?" Riven asked coldly. "Frame a Greystone Elder for attempted murder? Why would I bother when there are easier ways to damage your pack's reputation?" "Because you want to humiliate us," Corwin snapped, rising to stand beside Marrow. "You brought that unbonded girl here specifically to undermine our traditions, and now you're trying to—" "Your traditions almost got her killed," Riven interrupted. "Don't pretend this is about honor." "Enough," Marin said. She pointed her staff at Marrow. "You will submit to questioning tomorrow. Until then, you're confined to your quarters under guard." "This is a violation of—" "This is a murder investigation," Marin said flatly. "You'll do as you're told, or I'll have you dragged to the cells. Choose." Marrow's jaw worked. Finally, he nodded stiffly. Two of Marin's personal guards stepped forward to escort him out. As Marrow passed Kaela, he leaned in close. "You've made a terrible mistake, girl." Then he was gone. The session dissolved into arguments. Kaela sat frozen, her heart pounding. Corwin was staring at her with pure hatred in his eyes. And suddenly, she understood. This wasn't just about her speaking out. This wasn't just about tradition. This was about power, about control, about a system that couldn't tolerate anyone who didn't fit neatly into their boxes. And she'd just proven that she wouldn't be put in a box. That night, Kaela couldn't sleep. She lay in her new quarters in the main hall, listening to the sounds of sleeping wolves around her, and tried to process everything. Someone from her old pack, someone she'd probably known, maybe even respected, had tried to have her killed, because she'd asked a question, because she'd suggested a compromise, because she existed outside the bond, and that terrified them. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went to find Riven. He was in his study, surrounded by maps and documents. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" "No." "Join the club." He poured her a glass of water and gestured to a chair. "What's on your mind?" "Everything. Nothing. I don't know." Kaela sat down heavily. "I keep thinking about what Marrow said, that I made a mistake." "You didn't." "How do you know?" "Because mistakes require regret. Do you regret speaking up yesterday?" Kaela thought about it. "No." "Then it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice." "A choice that almost got me killed." "Yes," Riven said simply. "Welcome to the cost of changing things. It's not pretty." Kaela looked at him, really looked at him. "Why are you doing this? Really? Not the political reasons or the symbol reasons. Why do you actually care?" Riven was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because 15 years ago, my sister was rejected by the bond. 3 ceremonies, just like you. And instead of accepting it, instead of finding another way, she walked into the forest and never came back." Kayla's breath caught. "Riven?" "They found her body 2 weeks later. She'd starved to death rather than go back and be nothing." His hands clenched. "And the elders said it was for the best. Said she was too weak to survive anyway. Said the bond had made the right choice." "I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. I want you to understand what you represent. Every unbonded wolf who was told they're worthless. Every wolf who doesn't fit the mold and gets thrown away. You're proof that the system is broken. And more than that, he met her eyes. You're proof that there's another way. Kaela's throat was tight. What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough to... You're already strong enough, Riven said. You survived when my sister didn't. You're standing when others fell. That's not nothing. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Kaela asked the question that had been building in her chest since the attack. What happens tomorrow, after Maren questions Marrow? One of three things. Either he confesses and takes the punishment, or he denies everything and Maren has to decide who to believe. Or what? Riven's expression was grim. Or whoever's really behind this decides to cut their losses and eliminate all the witnesses, Colin, Marrow, maybe even you. That's a cheerful thought. You asked. Kaela stood and walked to the window. Outside, the moon was nearly full, turning the compound silver. I can't go back to Greystone. Even if they asked, even if Corwin apologized, I can't go back to being invisible. I know. But I don't know what comes next. Neither do I, Riven admitted. But I know we figure it out together. If you want. Kaela turned to look at him. You're offering me a permanent place? In Black Ridge? I'm offering you a choice. Stay with us. Help us build something better than what the old system offers. Or leave, and I'll make sure you have everything you need to survive on your own. Either way, you're not alone unless you want to be. It was the same offer he'd made before, but this time it felt different, more real, more dangerous. I need to think about it, Kaela said. Take your time. But Kaela, Riven's voice stopped her at the door. Whatever you choose, make sure it's yours. Don't let them push you into anything. Not me, not Maren, not anyone. Kaela nodded and left. She walked through the quiet halls, past sleeping guards, past darkened rooms. Her mind was spinning with possibilities and fears and hopes she didn't have names for. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the figure waiting in the shadows near her quarters. Almost. Kaela stopped, her hand going to the knife Vera had given her. The figure stepped into the moonlight. Elder Corwin. Kaela's heart slammed into her throat. What are you doing here? We need to talk. His voice was rough, urgent, somewhere private. I'm not going anywhere with you. Kaela, please. I know you have no reason to trust me, but you're right, I don't. Marrow didn't act alone, Corwin said quickly. There are others, people more powerful than him, more dangerous, and they're planning something for tomorrow. Kaela's grip tightened on the knife. Why are you telling me this? Because I was wrong about you. And because what they're planning, he shook his head. It's going to get people killed. A lot of people. And it starts with you. You expect me to believe you came here to warn me? After everything? I expect you to be smart enough to listen when someone's trying to save your life, Corwin snapped. Meet me at the North Watchtower in 10 minutes. Come alone. If you bring Vark or his wolves, I disappear and you learn nothing. He turned and walked away, melting into the shadows. Kaela stood frozen, her mind racing. This could be a trap. Probably was a trap. But what if it wasn't? What if Corwin was telling the truth? She looked back toward Riven's study. She should tell him, should get Vera and Dane and go as a group. But if she did that and Corwin ran, they'd learn nothing. And if something was really being planned for tomorrow, something that would get people killed, she needed to know what it was. Kaela made a decision. She was probably going to regret it. She headed for the North Watchtower alone. The watchtower was on the far edge of the compound, overlooking the valley. This late, it was unmanned. The guards rotated every 2 hours, and Kaela had timed her approach to hit the gap between shifts. Corwin was already there, standing at the edge of the platform, looking out over the darkness. You came, he said without turning. Talk fast. I'm not stupid enough to stay here long. Corwin turned to face her. In the moonlight, he looked older than she remembered, tired. There's a faction within the Elder Council. Not just Greystone, multiple packs. They believe the old ways are dying, and they blame wolves like you. Wolves like me. Unbonded wolves. Wolves who question tradition, who suggest compromise, who make the bond seem optional. He shook his head. To them, you're a disease, and diseases need to be eliminated. Kaela's blood ran cold. How many are in this faction? I don't know. They don't tell me everything, but enough to cause real damage. Corwin stepped closer. Tomorrow, during Marin's questioning of Marrow, they're planning to stage an incident. Make it look like Blackridge is harboring traitors. Give them an excuse to call for Riven's exile and your execution. That's insane. Marin would never... Marin is old. Powerful, yes, but old. And if enough alphas demand blood... Corwin trailed off. They're counting on chaos. On fear. On tradition overriding sense. Kaela's mind raced. Why are you telling me this? You're one of them. I was, Corwin said quietly. But I never agreed to murder. And what they're planning... His hands clenched. My daughter is bonded to a Blackridge wolf. She's there tomorrow. If violence breaks out, she could die. I won't allow that. So you're saving me to save her. I'm saving you because it's the right thing to do. Something I should have done 3 years ago instead of telling you that you were weak. The apology hung in the air between them. You were right, Corwin continued. About the bond not being everything. About there being other kinds of strength. I was too proud to see it. Too invested in the system. He met her eyes. But I see it now. And I'm asking you to trust me long enough to stop what's coming. Kaela wanted to believe him. Part of her even did. But 3 years of rejection had left scars. What do you want me to do? She asked carefully. Tomorrow, when Marin begins the questioning, you need to... The arrow took Corwin in the chest. He gasped, stumbling backward, his eyes wide with shock. Kaela screamed. More arrows whistled through the air. She dove behind the watchtower's low wall, her heart trying to punch through her ribs. Corwin collapsed, blood spreading across his shirt. He reached for Kaela, his mouth moving, but no sound came out. Then his eyes went empty. Kaela pressed herself against the wall, breathing in ragged gasps. Her mind was screaming at her to run, but her body wouldn't move. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Multiple people. She was trapped. The knife in her hand felt like a toy. What was she supposed to do against arrows? Against trained killers? The footsteps got closer. Kaela looked at Corwin's body, at the blood pooling beneath him, at the information that had died with him, and something inside her snapped. She was done being afraid, done being the victim, done letting other people decide whether she lived or died. If they wanted her dead, they'd have to work for it. Kaela stood, knife in hand, and faced the stairs. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, masked, armed with crossbows. The first one raised his weapon, and Kaela ran straight at him. She had no plan, no strategy, just fury and desperation, and the absolute refusal to die quietly. The crossbow fired. She twisted, felt the bolt graze her shoulder, and then she was inside his guard. Her knife found his thigh. He screamed. The second attacker grabbed her from behind, but she threw her head back, felt his nose crunch, and he let go. The third one was smarter. He didn't come close, just raised his crossbow and aimed. Kaela was out of options. She closed her eyes. The impact never came. Instead, she heard a roar that shook the watchtower. She opened her eyes to see Vera standing between her and the attacker, the crossbow bolt buried in Vera's shoulder instead of Kaela's heart. Then Dane was there, and Soren, and a dozen Blackridge wolves pouring onto the platform like a storm. The fight lasted seconds. The attackers didn't stand a chance. When it was over, Kaela stood in the center of the carnage, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Riven appeared, took one look at Corwin's body and Kaela's blood-stained hands, and his face went hard. "Get her out of here," he said to Vera. "Now." "I'm fine," Kaela said, but her voice came out wrong, distant. "You're in shock," Vera said gently, steering her toward the stairs. "Come on." As they descended, Kaela looked back once. Riven was kneeling beside Corwin's body, his expression unreadable. And Kaela realized with crystal clarity that everything had just changed. The faction Corwin mentioned, they'd just declared war. And she was standing right in the center of it. Tomorrow's questioning wasn't going to be about finding the truth anymore. It was going to be a battlefield. And Kaela had no idea if she'd survive it. They took Kaela to the healer's quarters, but she couldn't sit still. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Corwin's face, the shock, the blood, the way his mouth had moved trying to tell her something she'd never hear now. Iris cleaned the graze on her shoulder without speaking. The old healer had seen enough violence in her life not to ask questions. Vera sat in the corner, her own shoulder freshly bandaged. The crossbow bolt had gone clean through muscle. She'd barely flinched when they pulled it out. "You should have stayed back," Kaela said quietly. "You could have been killed." Vera snorted. "So could you. That's kind of the point of taking a bolt for someone." "But why? You barely know me." "I know enough." Vera met her eyes. "You didn't run when those attackers came for you. You fought. That's worth protecting." Kaela didn't know what to say to that. The door opened and Riven walked in, followed by Soren and Dane. All three looked grim. "The attackers are dead," Riven said without preamble. "Fought to the death rather than be captured, which means we have no testimony." "What about their weapons? Their clothes?" Kaela asked. "Nothing distinctive. Standard mercenary gear, no marks, no way to trace them." Riven's jaw tightened. Whoever hired them covered their tracks. "Corwin knew," Kaela said. "He was trying to warn me about tomorrow, about some kind of staged incident during Marrow's questioning." Every head turned to her. "What exactly did he say?" Soren asked, pulling out a small notebook. Kaela repeated everything Corwin had told her, the faction within the Elder Council, the plan to frame Blackridge, the goal of getting Riven exiled and Kaela executed. When she finished, the room was silent. "A multi-pack conspiracy," Dane said finally. "That's ambitious." "That's terrifying," Vera corrected. "If elders from multiple packs are coordinating against us—" "We don't know that for certain," Riven interrupted. "Corwin could have been lying, setting us up for a different trap. Or he was telling the truth and they killed him to shut him up." Kaela shot back. "Those arrows were meant for me. He just got in the way." "Maybe. Or maybe he was the real target and you were just the bait." Kayla's head was starting to hurt. "Either way, we know something's happening tomorrow, and we need to be ready for it." Riven studied her for a long moment. "You realize what you're saying. You want to walk into that hall knowing there's going to be an attack." "I want to walk in prepared to counter it," Kaela said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes. Because if we don't show up, if we hide or run, then they win without firing a shot. They'll say Blackridge was guilty, that I was a coward, that everything they believe about unbonded wolves being weak was right." She stood, even though her legs felt unsteady. "But if we show up, if we face whatever they throw at us, if we prove that we can't be intimidated, then we might survive long enough to change some minds," Riven finished. "Or we might all die in a hall full of hostile alphas." "Probably both," Kaela admitted. "But I'd rather die fighting than live as proof that they were right about me." Vera laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound. "I like her. Can we keep her?" "That's up to her," Riven said, his eyes never leaving Kayla's face. "What do you want, Kaela? Really? Not what you think you should want, not what would make a good story. What do you actually want?" The question hung in the air. Kaela thought about Greystone, about 3 years of being invisible. She thought about the forest, about dying slowly while everyone moved on without her. She thought about the past week, training with Vera, studying with Soren, learning from Riven how to see the patterns beneath the surface. She thought about walking into that summit hall and speaking when she should have stayed silent, suggesting compromise when she should have kept her head down. She thought about Corwin's last words, about the faction that wanted her dead, about the wolves who couldn't tolerate anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of strength. "I want to break their system," she said. "I want to prove that the bond isn't the only thing that matters, that there are other kinds of strength, other ways to be powerful. I want to make it so no other unbonded wolf has to feel worthless ever again." Riven smiled, not his usual calculated expression, but something genuine. "Then let's go to war." They spent the rest of the night planning. Soren mapped out the summit hall, marking exits, blind spots, places where attackers could hide. Dane inventoried their fighters, calculating how many wolves they could trust versus how many might turn against them. Vera worked with the other Blackridge wolves, preparing for every scenario from riots to assassinations. And Kaela sat with Riven, learning how to turn tomorrow's questioning into a battlefield she could win. "Merrin will start by asking Marrow about the attack," Riven said, pointing to his notes. "He'll deny everything. Standard procedure. The question is what happens next." Corwin said they're planning to stage something. Make it look like Blackridge is harboring traitors, which means they'll need evidence. Planted evidence, probably. Something damning enough to turn the other alphas against us. Kaela thought about it. What if we find it first? Riven raised an eyebrow. Find what? Whatever they planted. If we know what they're going to discover, we can expose it as fake before they spring the trap. That assumes we can figure out what it is and where they hid it. So we search. We have... Kaela glanced at the window. Dawn was breaking. Maybe 3 hours before the session starts. That's enough time. To search an entire compound? Not even close. Then we don't search everywhere. We search the most obvious places, wherever the evidence would need to be for maximum impact. Kaela stood, pacing now. Think about it. If you wanted to frame Blackridge, what would you plant, and where would you put it? Riven's expression sharpened. Documents? Letters, maybe. Proof of conspiracy or treason, something that would require Merrin to act immediately. And you'd put them somewhere public, somewhere they'd be found during the questioning. The hall itself, Soren said, looking up from his maps. Hidden in the Blackridge section, maybe. Or in our delegation quarters. Split up, Riven ordered. Soren, take the hall. Dane, our quarters. Vera, coordinate with our people. Anyone sees something suspicious, anything at all, they report immediately. Kaela and I will search Marrow's rooms. Why Marrow's rooms? Kaela asked. Because if they're framing us, they might have planted counter-evidence there too. Something to make him look innocent when the accusations fly. Riven grabbed his coat. Move fast. We're running out of time. They scattered. Riven and Kaela made their way to the guest wing where the Greystone delegation was housed. Most wolves were still asleep. It wasn't quite dawn yet. The guards at the corridor entrance recognized Riven and let them pass without question. Marrow's door was locked, but Riven had a key. Kaela didn't ask where he got it. Inside the room was neat, almost to the point of obsession. Every book aligned perfectly on the shelf. Every piece of clothing folded precisely. It looked like a room no one actually lived in. You take the desk, Riven said. I'll check the floorboards. Kaela went through the desk drawers methodically. Letters from family, notes on pack business, a ledger tracking expenses. Nothing incriminating, nothing planted. But in the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of blank parchment, she found something else. A journal. Old, leather-bound, filled with cramped handwriting. She opened it and started reading. The entries went back years. Complaints about unbonded wolves, rants about tradition dying, plans for maintaining the old order. And then more recently, discussions of the faction and the necessary elimination of threats. Riven, Kaela said quietly, you need to see this. He came over and read over her shoulder. His expression darkened with every page. This is either damning evidence against Marrow, he said slowly, or the most obvious plant I've ever seen. It's too convenient, Kaela agreed. But why leave it here? If they wanted to frame him, they wouldn't. This is insurance. If their plan fails, if we start gaining ground, they throw Marrow to the wolves and claim he acted alone. Riven closed the journal. We're taking this. Won't that tip them off? They're going to know we're on to them the moment we walk into that hall ready for a fight. Might as well have evidence on our side. They left the room quickly, passing 2 Greystone wolves in the hallway who stared at them with open suspicion. By the time they got back to Blackridge's section, the others had returned. Found this in the hall, Soren said, holding up a sealed letter. Hidden behind a loose stone in the wall near our seats. It's addressed to you, Riven, from Marcus of Iron Peak, discussing plans to overthrow Merrin and seize control of the Continental Council. Let me guess, Riven said flatly. I'm supposedly the mastermind. Naturally. Dane held up a small box. And I found this in your quarters. Poison. The same kind used to kill 3 wolves from Silvermere last year. They're building a case, Vera said grimly. Multiple crimes, multiple victims, enough to turn everyone against us. Kaela felt sick. This is insane. No one will believe. They'll believe what they want to believe, Riven interrupted. And right now, a lot of alphas want to believe that the bond is absolute and anyone who questions it is dangerous. He looked at each of them. When we walk into that hall this morning, we're walking into an ambush.
They have fake evidence. They probably have witnesses ready to lie. And they definitely have wolves prepared to use violence if words don't work.
So what's the plan? Dane asked. Riven smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. We let them spring the trap, and then we turn it inside out. The summit hall was packed. Word of Corwin's death had spread fast, and every alpha, elder, and power broker on the continent wanted to see what happened next. Kaela walked in with the Blackridge delegation, surrounded by their fighters, and felt 1,000 eyes tracking her every movement. The Greystone section was in chaos. With Corwin dead and Marrow under house arrest, Elder Thane was trying to hold things together, but he looked overwhelmed. High Elder Marin sat in her chair at the head of the hall, her ancient face impossible to read. When everyone was seated, she stood and silence fell. Elder Corwin of Greystone Pack was murdered last night, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Along with him, 3 mercenaries were killed. All of them were found at the North Watchtower, where Kaela Thorn was also present. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kaela kept her face neutral. Before we proceed with questioning Elder Marrow, Marin continued, I want to hear from Miss Thorn what happened at that watchtower. Kaela stood. Her legs were steady this time. Elder Corwin asked to meet me there. He said he had information about a planned attack during today's session. And you went alone? Without telling anyone? Yes, High Elder, which was stupid, but he said he'd only talk if I came alone. What did he tell you? Kaela took a breath. This was it. He told me there's a faction within the Elder Council, multiple packs. They believe unbonded wolves and anyone who questions traditional bond hierarchies are a threat, and they've been planning to eliminate that threat using whatever means necessary. The hall erupted. Alphas shouted denials. Elders demanded proof. It took Marin 3 strikes of her staff to restore order. That's a serious accusation, Marin said. I know. But before Elder Corwin could give me details, he was killed, shot with arrows from the shadows. The mercenaries came after me next. If Blackridge wolves hadn't arrived when they did, I'd be dead too. Convenient, someone shouted from the crowd. The only witness dies and we're supposed to believe... I have proof, Kaela said. The hall went silent. She pulled out Marrow's journal and held it up. This belongs to Elder Marrow. It details years of planning, meetings with other elders, discussions of necessary eliminations. It's all here. Marrow stood, his face purple. That's a lie. That journal is a fake. It was planted in my room by... By who? Kaela asked calmly. By me? I've been under guard since the attack. I couldn't have planted anything even if I wanted to. Then by Vark, by Blackridge. This is exactly what I warned you about, High Elder. They're trying to... We also found these, Riven said, standing smoothly. He held up the letter and the box of poison. Hidden in our section of the hall and in my personal quarters. Evidence carefully planted to frame Blackridge for multiple crimes. Treason, murder, all of it designed to discredit us exactly when we'd be most vulnerable. The Alphas were staring now, confusion replacing anger. Someone is playing a very elaborate game, Riven continued, planting evidence on both sides, creating chaos, turning us against each other. The question is why? Because chaos serves their purpose, Kaela said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice was. As long as we're fighting among ourselves, questioning each other, we're not questioning the system. We're not asking why the bond is treated as the only measure of worth. We're not wondering if there might be better ways to organize our packs. This is propaganda, Elder Thane shouted. She's trying to undermine everything we... I'm trying to stop people from dying, Kaela shot back. Corwin died trying to warn me. How many more have to die before we admit something is broken? The only thing broken is your understanding of tradition, Marrow snarled. The bond has served us for centuries. It's sacred. It's a tool, Kaela interrupted. A powerful tool, yes, but it's not the only tool, and treating it like the only thing that matters has led to this. To factions. To murder. To wolves like me being told we're worthless. She looked around the hall, meeting as many eyes as she could. I'm not trying to destroy your traditions. I'm trying to expand them. To make room for wolves who don't fit the mold, but who still have something to offer. You offer nothing but chaos, an alpha from the back shouted. I offer a solution to a century-old territorial dispute that you couldn't solve, Kaela replied. I survived an assassination attempt. I saved a dying elder using nothing but determination. I stood in front of you yesterday and asked questions no one else would ask. Her voice rose. If that's nothing, then I don't know what you consider valuable. The hall was silent now, really silent. High Elder Marin stood slowly. Enough, she said. We're going to settle this properly. Elder Marrow, you will be questioned under truth compulsion. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. I refuse, Marrow said. This is a murder investigation, Marin said, her voice like iron. You'll submit or you'll be executed for obstruction. Those are your options. Marrow's face went white. He looked around the hall, maybe searching for support, for someone from his faction to intervene. No one moved. Slowly, he sat down. Marin gestured to two of her guards. They brought out a small bronze bowl filled with liquid that glowed faintly in the morning light. Truth water. Ancient magic, rarely used, impossible to fool. The guards forced Marrow to drink. His face contorted. The magic took hold, wrapping around him like chains. Marin stepped forward. Did you hire mercenaries to kill Kaela Thorn? Marrow's mouth opened. He tried to stay silent, but the magic dragged the words out. Yes. Gasps echoed through the hall. Did you act alone? No. The word came out strangled. There are others, a coalition. We've been planning for months. Name them. Marrow listed 7 names, elders from 5 different packs. 1 was from Iron Peak, Colin's direct superior. 2 were from Silvermere, the others were from smaller territories. With each name, the hall grew quieter. What was your goal? Marin asked. To preserve order, Marrow said, and the compulsion made his voice hollow. To eliminate threats to the bond system, to make an example of anyone who questioned tradition. By murder. By whatever means necessary. Marin's face was carved from stone. Did you kill Elder Corwin? I gave the order. He was trying to betray the coalition, to warn the girl. He had to be silenced. The silence in the hall was absolute. Marin turned to her guards. Arrest him, and send riders to detain the others he named. As the guards dragged Marrow away, he screamed at the assembled alphas. You're fools, all of you! She's destroying everything! The unbonded will poison the packs. The bond will mean nothing. You'll see. You'll all see. Then he was gone, and the hall erupted into chaos. Alphas argued with each other. Elders shouted accusations and denials. It took Marin 10 minutes to restore order. When she finally did, she turned to Kaela. You've caused quite the disruption, Miss Thorn. Kayla's heart was pounding, but she met the High Elder's gaze. I didn't mean to, High Elder. Didn't you? Marin's eyes were sharp. You walked into this summit knowing you'd be rejected, knowing you'd face hostility, and yet you spoke up anyway. You challenged century-old disputes. You exposed corruption. You survived multiple assassination attempts. She paused. That doesn't sound like someone who stumbled into disruption. That sounds like someone who chose it. Kaela swallowed. I chose to survive. The rest just happened. Nothing just happens, child. Not at this level. Marin studied her. What do you want? And don't tell me you want to break the system. I want specifics. Kaela hadn't expected the question, but as she stood there with every powerful wolf on the continent watching her, the answer crystallized. I want unbonded wolves to have options, she said. Right now, if you can't bond, you're nothing. You're a servant at best, a ghost at worst. I want to change that, create paths for wolves like me to contribute, to lead, to matter, without needing the bond to validate our worth. You're talking about restructuring pack hierarchies across the continent. I'm talking about expansion, not destruction. Keep the bond, honor it, but make room for other kinds of strength too. Marin was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to address the hall. Miss Thorn has raised questions that deserve answers, and exposing Elder Marrow's coalition has revealed cracks in our system that we can no longer ignore. She looked at each alpha in turn. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss potential reforms. Until then, this session is adjourned. The dismissal was clear. Wolves began filing out, many of them still arguing, some looking shell-shocked. Kaela stood frozen, not quite believing what had just happened. Riven appeared at her elbow. Come on, we need to get you out of here before someone decides to continue what Marrow started. But as they moved toward the exit, a voice stopped them. Miss Thorn, a word. Kaela turned. Alpha Marcus of Iron Peak stood there. his massive frame blocking their path. She tensed, but Marcus just smiled. That was well done. Watching you dismantle Marrow's testimony piece by piece, that was masterclass. I just told the truth, Kaela said carefully. You did more than that. You made them listen. Marcus extended his hand. If you ever need allies, Iron Peak remembers favors. You solved our territorial dispute. That's worth something. Kaela shook his hand, surprised by the warmth in his grip. Other alphas approached after Marcus left. Not all of them, but enough. Quiet words of support, nods of respect. A few even apologized for doubting her. By the time they made it outside, Kaela felt dizzy. That, Vera said, grinning, was incredible. That was terrifying, Kaela corrected. Same thing, Dane said. You just went toe-to-toe with the most powerful wolves on the continent and won. I didn't win. I survived. In pack politics, Riven said quietly, that's the same thing. That evening, they held a small gathering in Black Ridge's section of the compound. Nothing formal, just the inner circle. Riven, Vera, Dane, Soren, Orin, and a few other trusted wolves. Kaela sat by the fire, exhausted down to her bones, but unable to sleep. Orin settled into the chair beside her with a grunt. His leg was almost fully healed now. You did good today, girl. I almost got everyone killed, but you didn't. And you exposed a conspiracy that would have torn the packs apart. He chuckled. Not bad for someone Greystone called worthless. Kaela looked at him. Do you really think anything will change after tomorrow's session, or will they just go back to the old ways once the shock wears off? I don't know, Orin admitted. Change is slow, especially when you're fighting centuries of tradition, but you've planted seeds. Made people question assumptions they've held their whole lives. That matters. Does it? If nothing changes, if unbonded wolves are still treated like, then you keep pushing, Orin interrupted. You keep asking questions. You keep proving that there are other ways to be strong. You don't give up just because the first battle didn't win the war. Riven joined them, handing Kaela a cup of something warm. You should rest. Tomorrow's session is going to be long. I know, I just keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong. They could, Riven agreed, but they could also go right. You've got alphas talking about reform. That's not nothing. It's also not everything. No, Riven said, but it's a start. He sat down across from her. I have a proposition for you. Kaela raised an eyebrow. Another one? After the summit ends, stay with Blackridge. Not as a guest, as a permanent member. Help us build what we've been talking about. A pack that values strength in all its forms, not just the bond. Kaela's breath caught. You're serious? Completely. You've proven yourself 10 times over, and I think you could help us create something that matters. Something that changes how packs operate. He paused. But only if you want to. This isn't charity. This is me recognizing talent and trying to keep it close. What would I do? I'm not a fighter. I'm not an elder. You're someone who sees problems and solves them, Riven said. Someone who asks the right questions. Someone wolves are starting to listen to. That's rare and valuable. Kaela looked around at the gathered wolves. At Vera, who'd taken an arrow for her. At Dane and Soren, who'd searched the compound to protect her. At Orin, who'd believed in her from the start. At Riven, who'd given her a chance when no one else would. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay. Riven smiled, genuine and warm. Good. Then let's get to work. The conversation shifted to logistics, to plans for tomorrow's session, to speculation about which alphas might support reforms and which would resist. But Kaela barely heard any of it. She was thinking about Greystone, about the girl who'd walked away from that bonfire ceremony feeling worthless and invisible. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd survived assassination attempts, exposed conspiracies, and started conversations that might reshape pack politics for generations. Someone the continent was starting to know by name. Kaela Thorn wasn't a ghost anymore, and she was just getting started. Across the compound, in various quarters, other conversations were happening. Alphas discussing the day's revelations. Elders recalculating alliances. Wolves who'd spent their whole lives believing in the absolute supremacy of the bond suddenly questioning whether they'd been wrong. The cracks in the system were showing, and tomorrow Kaela would walk into that hall and see if those cracks could become doorways, or if they'd collapse and bury her instead. Either way, she wouldn't be doing it alone. The morning of the reform session, Kaela woke before dawn with her stomach in knots. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Corwin's face, heard Marrow's screams, felt the weight of 1,000 hostile stares. Today would decide everything, whether the cracks in the system could actually become change, or whether they'd snap shut and crush anyone caught between them. Vera found her standing by the window, watching the sun rise over the valley. "You ready for this?" Vera asked. "No," Kaela said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." "Good answer." Vera handed her a cup of tea. "Riven wants to go over strategy one more time before we head to the hall." They gathered in Riven's study, the core group that had become something like family over the past week. Riven stood at the center, maps and notes spread across every surface. "Today's session will determine whether Marrow's confession leads to actual reform or just temporary outrage," he said without preamble. "Marin will open the floor to proposals. Multiple alphas will speak. Some will support change. Most will resist it." "What's our play?" Dane asked. "We let them argue themselves into circles," Riven said. "Let them expose how fragmented they are, how contradictory their positions become when you actually examine them. And then," he looked at Kaela, "you offer a concrete alternative." Kayla's throat went dry. "Me? I'm not an alpha. I'm not even bonded. Why would they listen to—" "Because you're the only one in that hall with nothing to lose," Riven interrupted. "Every alpha in there is protecting territory, status, power. Their proposals will reflect that. But you're asking for something that doesn't threaten any of them directly. You're not trying to take anyone's pack or diminish anyone's bond. You're just asking for room to exist." "That's still a threat to them," Kaela said. "To some, yes, but not to all. And the ones who are threatened will reveal themselves when they argue against basic fairness." Riven leaned forward. "The key is framing. You're not attacking the bond. You're asking for parallel paths. Alternative routes to contribution and respect that don't require magic." Soren pulled out a document. "I've drafted a proposal based on our discussions. 3 core points. First, establish formal roles for unbonded wolves in pack governance, advisors, specialists, teachers. Second, create a continental registry of unbonded skills so packs can share resources. Third, revise the laws around rejection to include support systems instead of just exile." Kaela read through it, her hands shaking slightly. "This is ambitious." "This is necessary," Oren said from his corner. "The current system wastes talent and destroys lives. It needs to change." "But will they accept it? Any of it?" "Some will," Riven said. "Others won't. But that's not the point. The point is starting the conversation, forcing them to defend their positions out loud, making them articulate why unbonded wolves should be worthless." He smiled grimly. "Most of them won't be able to. Because when you say it out loud, it sounds insane." Vera checked her weapons. "And when the ones who do think it's reasonable get violent?" "We're ready for that too," Dane said. "Every Blackridge wolf in that hall will be armed and positioned. If they want to fight, they'll get one." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Kaela said quietly. "Hope isn't a strategy," Riven replied, "but preparation is." The summit hall was even more packed than the day before. Word had spread across the territories. The Continental Council was about to debate fundamental pack law. Wolves who'd never attended a summit before had traveled through the night to witness it. Kaela walked in with her head high, though her heart was hammering. She'd chosen her clothes carefully, simple, practical, nothing that screamed for attention. She wanted to be heard, not dismissed as theatrical. The hall fell silent as she took her seat. High Elder Marin was already present, her ancient eyes tracking every movement. The other elders sat in their designated sections, most looking uncomfortable. The alphas were tense, whispering among themselves. And in the back, Kaela spotted a group she hadn't expected to see. Unbonded wolves, maybe 20 of them, standing along the rear wall. They must have heard what was happening and come to watch. Their faces were guarded, hopeful, afraid. Kaela felt the weight of their stares. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. Marin stood, and silence fell instantly. Yesterday, we exposed a conspiracy that threatened the foundation of pack law, she began. Today, we address the conditions that allowed such a conspiracy to form. Elder Marrow and his coalition believed unbonded wolves and those who questioned tradition represented an existential threat. The question we must answer is this: were they wrong? Murmurs rippled through the crowd.
I believe they were, Marin continued, but belief is not governance. We need concrete proposals, actionable changes. The floor is now open. For a moment, no one moved. Then Alpha Marcus stood. I propose we maintain the current system. The bond has served us for centuries. Changing it now, in response to one conspiracy, would be reactionary and dangerous. Several Alphas nodded in agreement. Alpha Kira of Silvermere stood next. I disagree. The conspiracy existed because wolves like Marrow felt threatened by even the suggestion of change. That suggests the system is more fragile than we'd like to admit. Or it suggests that change is dangerous, an elder from the Eastern Territories shouted. The bond is sacred. It's what separates us from common animals. Weakening it. No one is suggesting we weaken the bond, Kira interrupted. We're suggesting we acknowledge that strength comes in multiple forms. The bond is the only reliable measure, Marcus countered. Everything else is subjective, arbitrary. It opens the door to favoritism and corruption. And the current system doesn't? A younger Alpha asked. We exile wolves who can't bond through no fault of their own. We call that fair? The debate spiraled from there. Arguments about tradition versus progress, about the sanctity of magic versus practical governance, about risk versus compassion. Voices rose, tempers flared. Kaela watched it all, noting who said what, who allied with whom, where the real fault lines lay. After an hour of circular arguing, Marin slammed her staff down. Enough, she said. You're all talking past each other. We need specific proposals, not philosophical debates. She looked directly at Kaela. Miss Thorn, you've been silent. What do you propose? Every eye in the hall turned to her. Kaela stood slowly. Her mouth was dry, but her voice came out steady. I propose we stop treating the bond as the only path to contribution, she said. Right now, if you can't bond, you have two choices: serve silently or leave. I'm asking for a third option. Let unbonded wolves contribute in other ways. Use our skills, our knowledge, our perspectives. Create formal roles that don't require the bond, but still matter. Such as? Marcus asked, his tone skeptical but not hostile. Kaela pulled out Soren's document. Advisors specializing in areas bonded wolves might overlook. Teachers for young wolves, especially those struggling with the bond process. Mediators for disputes, since we're not bound by pack loyalty in the same way. Record keepers, historians, strategists. She looked around the hall. There are dozens of roles that need intelligence and dedication, not magic. And you think unbonded wolves can be trusted with such positions? An elder asked. I think judging trust based on whether someone has magic is lazy, Kaela said, and several wolves gasped at her bluntness. Judge people by their actions, their character, their results. The bond doesn't make someone honest or competent. It just makes them powerful. Power is what matters in pack dynamics, Marcus said. Is it? Kaela challenged. Yesterday, I helped expose a multi-pack conspiracy. I didn't use the bond. I used observation, logic, and willingness to ask uncomfortable questions. If power was all that mattered, you'd all still be arguing about that forest while wolves died. But you're not, because someone without power asked why you were fighting in the first place. The hall was silent. You're asking us to restructure centuries of tradition based on one exception, an Alpha said. I'm not an exception, Kaela replied. I'm just the first one you bothered to notice. There are unbonded wolves in every territory doing valuable work that goes unrecognized because you've decided they don't matter. She gestured to the wolves standing in the back. They're here. They're watching. And they're tired of being invisible. Marin's eyes glinted. You've made your case. Does anyone second this proposal? Silence. Kaela's heart sank. Then Riven stood. Blackridge seconds. Alpha Kira stood. Silvermere seconds. A smaller Alpha Kaela didn't recognize Rose. Pinehaven seconds. One by one, wolves stood. Not all of them, not even half, but enough. Marcus remained seated, his expression thoughtful. I have concerns, but I'll admit the proposal has merit.
I'd like to see a trial implementation. 1 year, limited scope. We evaluate results before committing to continent-wide changes. It wasn't everything, but it was something. That's acceptable, Kaela said carefully. Marin nodded. We'll put it to a vote. All in favor of a 1-year trial of expanded roles for unbonded wolves, as outlined in Miss Thorn's proposal? Hands rose. Kaela counted quickly. 23 in favor. Opposed? 18 hands. Abstaining? 9. Marin's expression didn't change. The motion passes. We will implement a trial program beginning next month. Miss Thorn, you will work with the committee to develop specific guidelines and metrics for evaluation. Kaela nodded, not trusting her voice. It wasn't a revolution. It wasn't even full reform. But it was a start. The session continued for another 2 hours, hammering out details, assigning responsibilities, addressing concerns. By the time Marin adjourned, Kaela was exhausted. But as she stood to leave, something happened she didn't expect. The unbonded wolves in the back started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. Not everyone, but enough that the sound filled the hall. Kaela stood frozen, overwhelmed, as wolves she'd never met acknowledged what she'd done. Then someone grabbed her hand. Lila stood there, tears streaming down her face. You did it! You actually did it! I didn't do anything yet, Kaela said. This is just a trial. You gave us hope, Lila interrupted. All of us. Every wolf who's been told they're worthless because they can't bond. You proved we matter. She hugged Kaela fiercely. Thank you. Other wolves approached, some to congratulate her, some to express skepticism but grudging respect, a few to warn her that the fight wasn't over, that the opposition would regroup and push back. Kaela knew all of that, but right now in this moment she let herself feel the victory. That evening, Blackridge held a celebration. Nothing formal, just wolves gathering to mark something that mattered. Kaela found herself surrounded by people wanting to talk, to share stories, to thank her. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Vera appeared at her elbow. You need a break, come on. She led Kaela outside to a quiet courtyard where the noise faded to a distant hum. Better? Vera asked. Much. Thank you. Kaela sat on a stone bench and let out a long breath. I can't believe it actually worked. You can't? Vera laughed. The rest of us saw it coming. You walked into that hall like you owned it. I was terrified the entire time. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Vera sat beside her. Can I ask you something? Sure. What are you going to do now, after the trial program starts? Kaela had been trying not to think about that. I don't know. Help implement it, I guess. Make sure it actually works. And then? And then, I have no idea. Kaela looked up at the stars. A month ago, I was dying in the forest. A week ago, I was nobody. Now I'm supposed to help reshape pack governance across the continent. It's insane. It's life, Vera said. Things change fast when you stop hiding. I wasn't hiding. I was just trying to stay small, trying not to draw attention. Same thing. Vera's expression softened. You're not small anymore, Kaela. You're going to have to get used to that. Kaela knew she was right, but it was still strange, looking at where she'd been versus where she was now. Do you think it'll last? She asked quietly. The reforms? Or will they find a way to undo it once people stop paying attention? Some will try, Vera admitted. But you've got allies now, real ones. And you've proven you can fight when you need to. That matters. The courtyard door opened and Riven stepped out. There you are. People are asking for you. Tell them I died, Kaela said. Riven smiled. Can't. You're too useful alive. He sat on her other side. Seriously, though, how are you holding up? I'm overwhelmed and tired and still not sure any of this is real. It's real. And it's just the beginning. Riven looked at her. The trial program is going to be hard. There will be resistance, sabotage, wolves trying to prove it doesn't work. You ready for that? No, but I'll do it anyway. That's what I thought. Riven pulled out a small leather case and handed it to her. This is for you. Kaela opened it. Inside was a silver pin, simple, elegant, marked with Blackridge's emblem. It's the mark of a council member, Riven explained, reserved for wolves who advise the Alpha on matters of governance. I'm offering you a formal position,
Not as a guest, as Pack. Kaela stared at the pin, her throat tight. I'm unbonded. I know, that's why it matters. You'll be the first unbonded council member in Blackridge history. Probably in continental history. He met her eyes, but only if you want it. This isn't charity. It's recognition of what you've already proven you can do.
Kaela looked at the pin, feeling the weight of everything it represented. A month ago, she would have done anything for acceptance, for belonging, for someone to tell her she mattered. Now she had it. And it was terrifying. What if I fail? She asked quietly. What if the trial program falls apart and it's my fault? Then we pick up the pieces and try again, Riven said simply. Failure is part of changing things. The question isn't whether you'll fail sometimes. It's whether you'll keep going when you do. Kaela thought about the forest, about dying slowly while everyone moved on, about the moment she'd decided to walk away from Greystone rather than accept being nothing. She thought about Corwin's last words, about Marrow's screams, about the unbonded wolves standing in the back of the hall with hope in their eyes. She thought about all the wolves who'd been thrown away, told they were worthless, given no path forward, and she made her choice. Okay, she said, I'll take the position. Riven smiled and pinned the emblem to her collar. It gleamed in the moonlight, small but unmistakable. Vera raised an imaginary glass. To the council member who broke the world. I didn't break anything, Kaela protested. Not yet, Vera said with a grin. Give it time. But the next morning, Kaela stood at the edge of Blackridge territory, looking out over the valley where she'd nearly died 3 weeks ago. So much had changed. She'd changed. She wasn't the invisible girl from Greystone anymore. Wasn't the failure who couldn't bond. Wasn't the ghost haunting the edges of pack life. She was Kaela Thorn, council member of Blackridge Pack. The unbonded wolf who'd exposed a conspiracy, survived assassination attempts, and forced the Continental Council to vote on reforms. It still didn't feel real. Footsteps behind her. She turned to see a young wolf approaching nervously. He looked maybe 16, skinny and uncertain. Miss Thorn? He asked quietly. Just Kaela. I'm unbonded. Failed my first ceremony last month. His voice cracked. My pack told me I should leave, find somewhere I'd fit better. But I don't know where to go. Kayla's heart clenched. She saw herself in him. The fear, the shame, the certainty that being unbonded meant being worthless. What's your name? She asked. Torin. Torin, the trial program starts in a month. When it does, there will be opportunities for unbonded wolves to contribute in ways that matter. Real positions, real respect, not charity. She met his eyes. But in the meantime, you're welcome to stay here. Blackridge doesn't require the bond to have value. His eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? She gestured back toward the compound. Come on, let's get you settled. As they walked back together, Kaela realized something. This was her path forward. Not just implementing reforms or serving on councils, but finding wolves like Torin, wolves the system had thrown away, and showing them they mattered, giving them the chance she'd been given. Over the next weeks, more unbonded wolves arrived. Word had spread about the trial program, about Blackridge's new policies, about the wolf who'd stood in front of the Continental Council and demanded change. They came from all over, some hopeful, some desperate, all of them looking for a place to belong. Kaela worked with Riven and the others to create structure, training programs, mentorships, ways for unbonded wolves to develop skills and prove their worth without needing magic. It was hard work. There were failures and setbacks. Some wolves couldn't adapt. Some packs refused to participate in the trial program. Some of the opposition from the summit regrouped and started pushing back. But there were victories, too. An unbonded wolf named Sarah became an advisor on trade negotiations and saved her pack thousands in bad deals. A young wolf called Marcus, no relation to the Alpha, developed a new training method that helped struggling bonded wolves finally connect with the magic. An older, unbonded woman named Iris, yes, the same healer, wrote a comprehensive medical text that became required reading across multiple territories. Each success was proof. Each unbonded wolf who contributed was evidence that the system could be better. 6 months into the trial program, Kaela received a letter. It was from Greystone. She opened it with shaking hands. Dear Miss Thorn, the The Greystone Council has reviewed the results of the Continental Trial Program for unbonded wolf integration. We have seen the successes reported from Blackridge, Silvermere, Pinehaven, and others. We would like to formally apologize for our treatment of you. Our assessment of your capabilities was incorrect, and our rejection caused harm that cannot be undone. However, we hope to make amends. Greystone Pack wishes to participate in the trial program. We are inviting unbonded wolves to apply for positions as advisors, teachers, and specialists. And we would like to invite you to return, if you're willing, to help us implement these changes properly. We understand if you decline. But we wanted you to know that you were right, and we were wrong. With respect, Elder Thane and the Greystone Council. Kaela read the letter 3 times. An apology, an admission of wrongness, an invitation to return. A year ago, she would have done anything to hear those words. Now, she felt complicated. She showed the letter to Riven. He read it carefully, then handed it back. What do you want to do?
I don't know. Part of me wants to go back, prove to them that I made something of myself, show them what they lost. And the other part? The other part knows I don't need to prove anything anymore. I've already built something here, something that matters. She looked at him. What would you do? I'd ask what serves the mission. You're not just Kaela Thorn anymore. You're a symbol. What you do matters beyond just you.
Kaela thought about that, about all the unbonded wolves watching her, about the message she'd send with whatever choice she made. I'll go, she decided, but not to prove anything, to help them build something better, so other wolves don't have to go through what I did. Riven nodded. When? After the trial program evaluation, after we have concrete data showing what works. I want to go back with evidence, not just hope. Smart. The trial program evaluation happened 9 months after the summit. High Elder Marin convened a special session to review the results. The data was mixed but trending positive. Unbonded wolves in formal positions had contributed measurably to pack prosperity, conflict resolution, and knowledge preservation. There were challenges, resistance from traditionalists, integration issues, a few spectacular failures. But overall, the experiment was working. Marin stood before the assembled alphas and delivered her verdict. The trial program has demonstrated that unbonded wolves can contribute meaningfully to pack governance and prosperity. Therefore, I am recommending we make these reforms permanent and expand them continent-wide. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it passed with a solid majority. Kaela sat in the Blackridge section, the silver council pin gleaming on her collar, and felt something settle in her chest. They'd done it. Not perfectly, not completely, but they'd changed something fundamental about how packs operated. And wolves like her, unbonded, rejected, thrown away, would never have to feel worthless again. Look, 2 years after the summit, Kaela stood in Greystone's main hall. The space looked the same, but everything felt different. She was different. Elder Thane greeted her warmly. The other council members, some new, some familiar, treated her with respect that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. And in the corner, wearing an advisor's pin of her own, was Lila. Her cousin had taken an unbonded position after Kaela's reforms passed. She was now Greystone's primary conflict mediator, and from the reports Kaela had read, she was excellent at it. It's strange being back, Kaela admitted over dinner. Strange how? Lila asked. I used to think this place defined me, that being rejected here meant I was worthless everywhere. But now, Kaela looked around. It's just a place. It doesn't have power over me anymore. You took that power back, Lila said quietly, and you used it to change everything. Not everything, just some things. That's more than most people ever do. They worked together over the following months, implementing Greystone's unbonded integration program. It wasn't easy. There was resistance, old prejudices died hard, and several wolves made it clear they thought the reforms were a mistake. But there were successes too. Unbonded wolves finding purpose. Young wolves who failed their bonding ceremonies, having options beyond exile or servitude. Slowly, grudgingly, the culture shifted. One evening, Kaela found herself back at the ridge where she'd stood 3 years ago, watching the bonfire burn while her name went uncalled. She stood in the same spot, but this time she wasn't alone. Riven had traveled with her to Greystone. He stood beside her now, looking out over the valley. You thinking about that night? He asked.
Yeah. How different everything was, how small I felt.
You were never small, just invisible. There's a difference.
Kaela smiled. You keep saying that.
Because it's true. The strength was always there. You just needed the right circumstances to show it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. I got an offer today, Kaela said, from the Continental Council. They want to create a permanent position, Director of Unbonded Integration, oversee programs across all territories, report directly to Marin, help develop policy. Are you going to take it? I don't know. It's a lot of responsibility, and I'd have to travel constantly, leave Blackridge. You'd still be Pack, Riven interrupted. Distance doesn't change that. And honestly, you're probably the only wolf on the continent who could do that job effectively. What if I'm not ready? You survived assassination attempts, exposed conspiracies, and forced the most powerful wolves alive to change their minds about centuries of tradition. I think you can handle an administrative position. Kaela laughed. When you put it like that, you're going to take it, Riven said. It wasn't a question. Probably, but I'm terrified. Good. That means it matters. They walked back toward the pack grounds together. Along the way, they passed young wolves training, both bonded and unbonded, working together without the rigid hierarchy that used to separate them. It wasn't perfect. The world hadn't transformed overnight. There were still packs that refused to change, still wolves who believed the bond was the only thing that mattered, still resistance and prejudice and fear. But it was better than it had been. And that was enough. 3 months later, Kaela stood before the Continental Council one more time. She wore formal robes now, the mark of a council director. The silver pin from Blackridge was still on her collar, but it had been joined by others. Symbols of packs she'd worked with, territories she'd helped reform, wolves she'd given hope to. High Elder Marin administered the oath, and Kaela became the first unbonded wolf to hold a continental leadership position. The unbonded wolves in attendance, and there were many now, filling a whole section of the hall, stood and applauded. And this time, bonded wolves joined them. Not all. Not even most. But enough. Kaela looked out at the crowd and saw wolves she'd helped, wolves she'd trained, wolves who'd found purpose because she'd proven it was possible. She saw Riven, grinning with pride. She saw Vera, Dane, and Soren, her Blackridge family. She saw Lila, tears streaming down her face. She saw Torin, the nervous young wolf who'd approached her that day at the valley, now wearing an advisor's pin of his own. And she saw hundreds of other faces, some familiar, some strange, all of them watching her with something that looked like hope. Kaela Thorn had walked away from her pack's rejection ceremony 3 years ago, feeling worthless and invisible. Now she stood at the center of continental governance, representing every wolf who'd ever been told they didn't matter. The journey from ghost to force of nature hadn't been smooth. It had been terrifying and painful and marked by violence and loss. She still had scars, some visible, some not. She still had nightmares about crossbow bolts and dying in the forest, but she also had purpose. She had wolves who believed in her. She had proof that the system could change, that strength came in forms the old guard had refused to recognize. And she had a future that she'd built with her own hands, outside the bond, beyond rejection, stronger than magic. That night, as celebrations continued in the hall below, Kaela slipped away to a quiet balcony. The moon was full, turning the world silver. In the distance, she could hear wolves singing, the old songs, the pack songs. But with new verses being written even now, Riven found her there. "You did good today," he said. "We did good. This was never just me. True. But you were the one willing to start it. That takes something special." Kaela looked at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you ever regret it? Betting on me that day in the forest? All the chaos that followed?" Riven was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. "Not for a second. You've changed the world, Kaela. Made it better. That's not something to regret." "Even though people died? Even though—" "People die in every fight worth having," Riven said gently. "The question isn't whether there's a cost. It's whether the cost is worth what you gain. And this?" He gestured to the hall below, to the mixed crowd of bonded and unbonded wolves celebrating together. "This was worth it." Kaela wanted to believe that. Most days she did. What happens now? She asked. Now you do the job. Help more packs integrate. Train more unbonded wolves. Keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. He paused. And eventually, probably, you teach someone else to do it so you can move on to whatever comes next. There's a next? There's always a next. That's the beauty of actually living instead of just surviving. They stood together, watching the moon, listening to the songs rising from below. And Kaela realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the future, not of failure, not of being rejected or dismissed or called worthless. Because she'd proven, to herself and to the world, that strength came in forms they'd never imagined. That an unbonded wolf could survive assassination attempts, reshape pack politics, and build something that mattered. She'd walked into the wilderness ready to die. She'd walked out ready to live. And now, standing on this balcony with the moon overhead and her chosen family around her, Kaela Thorn understood what she'd really been fighting for all along. Not acceptance, not revenge, not even reform. Freedom. The freedom to be exactly who she was, scarred, stubborn, unbonded, and unstoppable, without apology or explanation. The freedom to build a life on her own terms, by her own rules, strong in ways the old system had no words for. The freedom to be seen, to matter, to count, and to help every other wolf who'd been thrown away find that same freedom for themselves. That was worth fighting for. That was worth everything. Below, the songs continued, new verses, new voices, new stories being written in real time, and Kaela smiled, listening to the future being born.